Chapter 875. They had already left Jiangnan for 3 days. Xiao Su's group traveled day and night, heading north without stopping. At dusk, everyone stopped to rest. Hua Ling untied the iron ring on the pigeon's leg and handed the letter to his master. Xiao Su put down the water bottle in his hand and roughly skimmed through the letter. His eyes darkened. Over the past few days, they had constantly received news from the front lines. Nansong had already sent the army south. Xiao Ran had been assassinated in the last battle and his whereabouts were unknown. The army was like a dragon without a leader and was currently waiting 100 li away. Hua Ling took the letter and quickly skimmed through it. His eyes were filled with surprise. "Master, the fourth prince is not here. The army's morale is unstable. Now that you have not taken over, I'm afraid something unexpected has happened. We must arrive as soon as possible. We cannot let those with ill intentions take advantage of us." Xiao Su's complexion was not very good. He did not expect that Xiao Ran would go missing. If he fell into the enemy's hands, he was afraid that he would be implicated in the war. If he was unlucky, Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. If that happened, it would be difficult to explain to the capital. Perhaps there would be another bloody storm. Does the capital know about this news? Xiao Su regained his calm and asked in a deep voice. Hua Ling shook his head. It has been suppressed for the time being. They seem to be sending people to investigate and do not dare to alert the higher-ups. Xiao Su frowned. Suppressed? Hua Ling nodded. His tone was a bit strange, as if he was disdainful. I heard that there are many people from the right prime minister following the fourth prince. Those who can follow the army are not low-ranking officials. They probably want to use this opportunity to quell the war to get promoted. However, they did not expect the fourth prince to suffer consecutive defeats. If even the fourth prince is unable to protect him, the higher-ups will not let them off so easily. Therefore, they want to first find people to minimize the severity of the situation. Hearing this, Xiao Su was silent for a moment. He thought of that worried, childish face when he left the capital 5 years ago. His voice was tense as he said, "Send people to the place where the fourth prince disappeared to search for him. Find him as soon as possible. If there is anything, report it immediately. If he is alive, I want to see him. If he is dead, I want to see his corpse." At this time, the conflict between the two factions had already reached a critical point. If it was anyone else, it would already be good if they didn't hit them while they were down, but his master was actually worried about his safety. However, Hua Ling was not surprised by his master's decision at all. Although he did not have any bad impressions of the fourth prince, they stood on different sides. So, he hoped that his master would not interfere, but his master had already given his orders and would not take them back. He could not interfere and could only agree. When Hua Ling left to handle matters and Turin came back from scouting, Xiao Su suddenly remembered something. With a solemn expression, he said, "Turin, have you received any letters from Jiangnan in the past 2 days?" Turin knew that his master was waiting for news from the little Wang Fei. He shook his head and said, "They are all from the front lines. Maybe we were in too much of a hurry and the carrier pigeons have not caught up." Xiao Su was not very satisfied with this explanation. He had ordered his subordinates to write down the little fellow's daily routine and send it to him. He hoped that nothing had happened. The news that Xiao Su had received the edict and was about to meet with the 3 armies quickly spread to Jingdou. The gloom of the past few days was swept away by the civil and military officials of the court. Everyone was in high spirits, their faces full. It was as though Xiao Su was not going to fight, but had already won and returned to court. It was said that when he saw this scene, the Sichuan emperor did not show any expression, but when he returned to the imperial study, he threw a great tantrum. This was a story for another day. Chaoyang Palace. Luo Yun reported the news from the left minister to Liang Ho. Then she gently patted Liang Ho's shoulder and said with a smile, "His Highness listens to your words. Otherwise, the matter of leading the army would be uncertain." Even though Su has not been by Ben Gong's side for many years, Ben Gong understands his temperament. No matter how stubborn he is, he will not disobey Ben Gong's orders. After putting down the heavy stone in her heart, Liang Ho relaxed and her expression was carefree. Whenever she thought of seeing Consort Yu's gloomy face in the Imperial Garden today, she felt as though she had poured out all the gloominess she had accumulated over the past few days. Her gaze was dark and cold. This little wench, if she wanted to fight with her, she would have to cultivate for a few more years. Then, Master, what should we do next? Luo Yun asked. Father said that we are in the limelight during this period of time, so we shouldn't act rashly for the time being. Later, send someone to inform the uncles of the three kingdoms to let Danjing and Danbing recuperate well. When Su returns, they will definitely have a place by his side. Liang Ho thought of the sorry state her two nieces were in when they were sent back. It could be said that they had been chased out of Jiangnan. She felt a bit embarrassed and threw a tantrum, but in the end he was still her son. Moreover, he was so far away that she couldn't teach him a lesson. In addition, the assassins she had sent out had all been wiped out, so she could only swallow her anger for now. Because of this matter, her third brother seemed to have a bit of a grudge against her. Even though she felt that her two nieces were not bad-looking, they were quite brainless. She had only chosen them as a last resort. However, they were still people from her maternal family and would be useful in the future. Thus, she had to appease them for now and make arrangements when the time came. Luo Yun nodded. In the beginning, the two misses were not able to enter His Highness's eyes because they did not spend enough time together. When they returned to the capital, His Highness might be moved after interacting for a long time. Liang Ho smiled coldly. Even if he is not moved, Su Wangfei can only be someone from the Liang family. Luo Yun repeatedly agreed. Liang Ho closed her eyes and enjoyed Luo Yun's shoulder massage. A moment later, she pretended to inadvertently remember something. Yesterday, Imperial Physician Shen went to Yun Gairen's palace. Was his body not feeling well? Luo Yun said as she rubbed her shoulder. Newbie was about to report this matter to Master. Yun Guiren said to the outside that she had caught a cold and closed the doors to visitors. However, recently, she has frequently ordered the imperial kitchen to prepare sour plum soup. I also heard the palace maid say that Yun Guiren has recently liked sour food. Newbie only heard this bit of information and has not yet asked Imperial Physician Shin. Based on Luo Yun's description, there was no need to guess. Most likely, Yun Guiren was pregnant, but in order to hide it from others and not be targeted, she hid it first. She probably wanted to wait for the fetus to stabilize before finding a good time to let His Majesty know. At that time, there would be someone to protect the dragon fetus. She wouldn't be afraid. Yun Guiren was planning this. Don't ask the imperial physician. Empress Liang narrowed her eyes, a cold light flashing in her eyes. Consort Yu has been paying attention to the front lines recently. I'm afraid that she is less concerned about the inner palace. Have someone leak some information to the palace maids by her side. When the time comes, someone will go find Imperial Physician Shen for us. We can just watch from the side. Hearing this, Luo Yun nodded in understanding. The corners of his mouth also revealed an indescribable smile. Master is right. Recently, there hasn't been anything exciting happening in the palace. It's quite boring. Now that there's going to be a good show, we have to enjoy it. This time, Liang Ho finally closed her eyes comfortably. Killing with a borrowed knife, this move was not strange in the inner palace. The people who were chosen were just unlucky. Chapter 876. Xiao Su made a mental note that he hadn't received a letter in 3 days. If the carrier pigeon didn't arrive in the next day, he would send someone back. He was worried that the people hiding in the dark would take the opportunity to make a move on her when he wasn't around. But what Xiao Su didn't expect was that the person he was worried about was lying leisurely not far from him, basking in the moonlight. Chu Qingyan was chewing on a straw and lying on the grass with one leg crossed over the other. Except for Jin Xian and Su Yi, the rest of her subordinates were hiding in the dark. In the past 6 months, the Shaolai cavalry in Jiangnan had been trained to follow Chu Qingyan, assassinate, disguise, and collect intelligence. They had also learned a lot from her. It could be said that they had completely become her shadow guards. Now, the Shaolai cavalry in Jiangnan was no longer called the Shaolai cavalry. Chu Qingyan had given them another name. The Shaolai cavalry only recognized her as their master. Now that Jin Xen was their leader, everyone was under his command. At this time, Jinshin checked the bag on his body and reported to his master, "Master, we don't have much dry food left. It can barely last for another day." Chu Qingyan stopped chewing on the straw. Because they were in a hurry, they didn't have time to make rujiamo. They only brought some food. She thought for a moment and said, "We'll pass by a village tomorrow afternoon. Take some money and buy some food from the villagers. By the way, try to avoid His Highness's people. I've calculated that the food they brought can only last for 2 days. I think they'll have the same plan as us." Jin Xian nodded. "I'll be careful." Chu Qingyan nodded. On the other side, Cheng Yenluo, who came back with a pot of water, happened to overhear their conversation. Her eyes fell on Chu Qingyan. Under the dim moonlight, the bright red figure was like a rare beauty in the night. Her expression was unrestrained, and she was even more charming than a man. Even though Cheng Yenluo knew that she wasn't a man, she couldn't help but fall into a trance. Her eyes were filled with pure admiration. Wasn't the heavens fair? If one was gifted with exceptional talent, one might not necessarily have a good appearance, and vice versa. But the woman in front of her was enough to make most of the world's outstanding women blush with shame. Most handsome men would beat the wall in shame. What? Could it be that you've fallen for my robe? Come, beauty, give me a smile. A clear voice rang out, accompanied by a cool breeze and a bright moon. It reverberated around the mountain stream, giving people an illusion of emptiness. However, the teasing words made people's faces turn black. "If you're really a man, I'm afraid you're a playboy. I used to worry that your big ice cube would be unfaithful to you. Now, I'm worried for him." Cheng Yenluo sat down beside her, but there was a distance between the two of them. Her disdain was obvious. Cheng Yenluo couldn't help but twitch her lips when she saw her acting. "Enough. Can't you see that your subordinates are watching from the side?" Chu Qingyan raised her brows. "They're my accomplices, the evil tyrant. They only listen to me." Hearing this, Cheng Yenluo glanced at Jinshin and Su. She saw that they were guarding the door loyally and were not affected at all. Cheng Yenluo's face darkened even more. It was true that the kind of strange master would have the same kind of strange subordinates. The two of them chatted for a while. Cheng Yenluo raised the question that had been bothering her along the way. "I remember that before Xiao Su left, he arranged for many covert guards to protect you. Now that you're no longer in Jiangnan, aren't you afraid that they'll send a message to Xiao Su? Then you'll be exposed." Chu Qingyan propped herself up. She rested her chin on one hand and looked at the person beside her. Her eyes were full of slyness. "You probably don't know that most of my men know how to disguise themselves, right?" Chu Qingyan is still in charge of the mansion. However, she's so angry that she's refusing to see anyone. Even Big Ice's covert guards don't dare to barge into her room. So, no one knows that the real Chu Qingyan is gone. But when we left that day, wasn't there a lot of commotion? Cheng Yenluo continued to raise her doubts. "That's simple. I drugged their food the night before. When they woke up, everything had returned to normal and the person in the house had already switched places." Realization dawned on Cheng Yenluo. "Don't blame you for being so fearless. It turns out that you've already planned everything. This is called having a policy and a countermeasure." "Impressive. That's right." Cheng Yenluo shook her head and sneered. "You're not modest at all. But to be honest, little girl, there are times when I really admire you. If you were a man with such scheming and intelligence, you'd be able to make a name for yourself in the imperial court, the pugilistic world, the battlefield, or the business world. You make it sound like I've accomplished nothing." Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows and looked back at her with a chuckle. Cheng Yenluo recalled her struggles in the business world over the past 6 months. She couldn't help but smile. "I forgot that you've already made a name for yourself in the business world." Chu Qingyan lay down again. Her gaze fell on the night sky above. The dazzling light fell into her eyes. It was hazy. "Actually, I'm not as good as you make me out to be. I'm just doing what is necessary in a necessary situation." I remember someone once said that if you want someone to be strong, you have to give him someone he wants to protect. At this point she sighed softly, but the corners of her lips curled up. It's just that I have too many people I want to protect. Actually, it's not a burden, but a blessing. Why do you say so? Because the more people you want to protect, the more you have. Life tends to be complete. Such a life is blissful and fulfilling. Cheng Yanluo turned to look at her in surprise, but only saw a gentle side profile. So, having people you want to protect is a blessing? Yanluo, what about you? Why do you suddenly want to go to the battlefield with me? I want to stay by Big Ice Cube's side. What about you? Who do you want to stay by? Just as she was in a daze, a sharp voice came at her. It was light but powerful. In the windy night, at the foot of a mountain in front of a village, a black mass of assassins was lying in ambush. 2 people were standing on top of the mountain. According to the route, Xiao Su and his party will probably arrive here tomorrow evening. As long as they fall into our ambush, they won't be able to escape even if they have wings. The person on the left laughed eerily. In such a quiet night, it was creepy. The person on the right was a little uneasy about his confidence. Xiao Su is not an ordinary person. He has Sichuan's legendary Xiao Lai cavalry by his side. It's best to be careful. I understand. Tell His Highness that I won't let him down. The person on the left retracted his arrogance and replied seriously. Then I'll congratulate you in advance. As long as you kill Xiao Su, His Highness will reward you handsomely. The person on the right smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you for your auspicious words. The 2 looked at each other and smiled viciously. Chapter 877. Cicadas started to chirp, adding a lot of heat to the quiet night. As soon as Chu Qingyan finished speaking, there seemed to be no other sound in the mountain except for the chirping of insects. The person being asked lowered her eyes, her long hair falling on both sides of her face, covering her bright and beautiful face. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. Her hands were folded on her knees, her fingers curled up unconsciously. The green grass in her eyes suddenly became blurry. Then, it was as if she saw that night, that handsome young man in white standing in front of her facing the night wind. Her eyes suddenly became wet. Little girl, I heard it the night you summoned me into your sleeve. She lowered her voice, as if she was suppressing some emotions. Chu Qingyan's eyebrows twitched. She turned to look at her, her voice soft and gentle. What did you hear? He said goodbye to me and asked me to live well in the future. Her voice was still soft, but the suppressed emotions were revealed as the words escaped her mouth. Chu Qingyan was slightly surprised. It wasn't hard to guess that the person should be ethereal. Originally, Big Ice Cube didn't want to let him go on this trip. She felt that a large part of the reason was that he didn't want Ethereal to miss out on Yen Luo again. However, Ethereal's attitude was very firm. Because no one could guarantee that they would come back alive from this trip. As his master's personal physician, he couldn't choose to retreat at this time. So in the end, Big Ice Cube could only agree. Then what did you think when you heard this? If Yen Luo had come here because of Kongling, would their relationship have taken a turn for the better? Chu Qingyan looked at her seriously, unwilling to miss out on any of her reactions. The entanglement between her and Ethereal had made others anxious. Now, Chu Qingyan's heart was in her throat. In her opinion, the 2 of them loved each other because of the incident in the past. Both of them were unwilling to face it, so they couldn't get over it. As long as one of them was willing to move forward, then this knot could be untied. Chu Qingyan's words made Qing Yanluo fall into a daze. I don't know. She hugged her knees dejectedly and buried her face in her legs, as if she could hide herself this way and not have to work hard to see her heart clearly. Upon hearing this, Chu Qingyan sighed softly. As expected, she was hiding again. However, it was not easy to make Yen Luo reveal such emotions. Then you want to go to the battlefield because of him, right? The questioning tone was filled with certainty. Cheng Yanluo froze on the spot as if her thoughts had been exposed. After a while, she still didn't hear a response. Chu Qingyan thought that he wouldn't answer. Just when she was about to give up, she heard a mosquito-like voice. I'm afraid I'll regret it if I don't go. His low voice was filled with surrender to the deepest desires in his heart. Hearing this answer, Chu Qingyan subtly raised the corner of her mouth and continued to bite the straw in her mouth, laughing silently. The two of them had a chance. She thought treacherously that if Big Ice Cube saw her secretly following him, she could use the excuse of matchmaking for his subordinate to alleviate his anger. It would be the best of both worlds. At dawn, Xiao Su continued on with his men. On the way, Huoling reported that the dry rations were about to run out. Xiao Su pondered for a moment and asked him to send a few men to buy dry rations at the villa in front of them, while the rest of the men rested in the woods on the side. At this time, Turan delivered a letter from Jiangnan. When Xiao Su saw this, he immediately took the letter, opened it, and read it without blinking. When Turan saw this, he thought that perhaps only news related to the young princess could make Master so impatient. Otherwise, the news from the front line would not have made Master so anxious. He was still thinking in his heart that after days of hurrying on the road, everyone was a little tired. His master's heart was worried about the front line, and his mood was even worse. He had originally hoped that the news of the little princess consort would bring relief to his master, but he did not expect his master to frown after reading the letter. "Master, did something happen in Jiangnan?" Turan hurriedly asked. If something happened to the young princess at this time, Master would not be able to leave with peace of mind. Xiao Su shook his head. "No." "Then why do you look so pale?" Turan sighed in relief and then asked in confusion. Xiao Su passed the letter to him. Turan hurriedly took it and hurriedly skimmed through it, but he did not understand. The letter says that the young princess will not come out for 4 days. It seems that she is still angry with Master. But the young princess is worried about you, but the food sent to the room has been eaten as usual. Master, you don't have to worry. Xiao Su frowned. This is not like Ian's style. Turan did not understand. Xiao Su stood at the top of the mountain with his hands behind his back. His expression was unfathomable, and no one knew what he was thinking. Turan was even more puzzled by his master's sudden worry. But when his master was deep in thought, he never went forward to disturb him. The mountain wind blew, mixed with a faint smell of blood. Xiao Su's gaze suddenly focused in the distance. Turan! In a mansion in the capital, there was a tea-green figure standing with his back facing him. In front of him was a pool of lotus flowers. But it was not the season to bloom yet. The green lotus leaves fluttered in the wind like a young girl's skirt, swaying gracefully on the surface of the pool. The water in the pool was clear, and the lotus leaves were clustered together. At a glance, it was very pleasing. Behind the tea-green man stood 2 tall men wearing eunuch uniforms. But their burly figures and cold expressions did not look like court eunuchs. "How's the matter?" The man standing by the pool spoke slowly. His voice was as pleasant as the tinkling of spring water. One of the eunuchs respectfully replied, "Our people have informed the Prince of Nansong of the 4th Prince's location. Currently, the 4th Prince has fallen into the Southern Song Army's encirclement. If there are no accidents, the 4th Prince will not be able to escape. Tell the Prince of Nansong that it is more useful to capture him alive than to kill him." The tea-green man smiled faintly. The other eunuch reported, "The King of England has already left for the battlefield. The Prince of Nansong received our news and has already sent people to kill him. Do you think they will succeed?" The man chuckled. "Whether they succeed or not is not important. What's important is that as long as we delay the eldest brother's pace, or at least let him reduce his energy, then when the time comes, won't we still suffer a crushing defeat?" The 2 men nodded in agreement. "Delay him and let him urgently take over the 3 armies. When the time comes, the spies hidden in the army will continue to leak information to the Southern Song Army. He won't have time to take care of it, or even if he knows, it will be too late to reverse the situation. Master's plan is so meticulous. He will definitely take down the 2 princes in one fell swoop. However, recently, the Prince of Nansong has been secretly investigating our identities." One of the eunuchs said, "Keep your hands and feet clean. When you meet with the Southern Song Army, do not reveal your identities." The man narrowed his eyes and warned, "This subordinate understands. You may leave." After the eunuchs left, the man slowly turned around, revealing his beautiful face. his pale cheeks gave people a sense of sickly beauty. This person was none other than Xiao Ho. The smile in his eyes was faint, but the murderous intent was strong. This time, he wanted Xiao Su to die on the battlefield, and Xiao ran to lose his reputation. Then, he would slowly nibble away at the fruits of his victory. Chapter 878. There's an ambush. At that time, Xiao Su's voice fell, and everyone immediately gathered together and flashed their weapons. At the same time, a large group of black-clothed men suddenly appeared in the forest. They held iron chains in their hands and flew over from all directions. Without saying a word, they attacked Xiao Su's group. Xiao Lai's cavalry did not need Xiao Su's order and raised their weapons to meet the assassins. The killing began in the blink of an eye. In the dusky evening, the sky was still clear, but a bloody and cruel battle unfolded in the mountains. Their attacks were fast, accurate, and ruthless. It was clear that the other side was a top assassin. Blood sprayed like a mist, and there were no shouts, only the sound of weapons clashing and the sound of injuries. It could be said that this was a silent battle. Xiao Su stood in the middle of the crowd, coldly glancing at the black-clothed men charging at them. At this time, 3 to 5 black-clothed men attacked him. He held his sword in one hand and the wind under his feet. 1 against 5, he met them without batting an eyelid. His speed was so fast that before they could react, they had already been hit by his sword. Before they could feel the pain, they had already fallen to the ground. The man with thick eyebrows who was standing in the shadows had been observing the situation below. Originally, he didn't feel nervous, but when he saw that the assassin he had carefully trained was killed in one move, and with only one move, he couldn't help but stare at Xiao Su. As expected of the war god of Sichuan, the thick-browed man gnashed his teeth and glared. When Xiao Su mercilessly killed another 3 people, he could no longer stand still. He pulled out the spear on his back and flew up, stabbing at Xiao Su's back. At this time, Chu Qingyan's group was resting several li away. Because they could not get too close to Xiao Su's group, the group fed the horses and rested, while Su Yi led the group to the village to buy dry food. We will eat casually later and not light a fire. We will continue on our way. Chu Qingyan said to the group. She knew Big Ice Cube and knew that he wouldn't stop to rest at this time, so she didn't want to pull the distance between them too far. After a reasonable rest, she chose to continue forward. Cheng Yanluo and Jin Xian had no objections. Cheng Yanluo walked over and handed her a bottle of water. She sighed with emotion. I've traveled far before, but I've never been in such a hurry. You martial artists really have bodies made of iron. It's as if you'll never get tired. Chu Qingyan's gaze landed on the 2 dark circles under Cheng Yanluo's eyes. Cheng Yanluo's face was comparable to a national treasure. Cheng Yanluo, who usually paid attention to her work and rest, had suffered a lot along the way. She smiled and said, "We're used to it. This is nothing. But you, on the other hand, have made me see you in a different light by persevering for so long. You make it sound like I'm so weak that I can't even stand a gust of wind. In any case, I'm someone who has lived under the eyes of wild beasts for the sake of gathering herbs, okay? In terms of patience and courage, he's not bad either, okay?" Cheng Yanluo immediately retorted unwillingly. She didn't want to be looked down upon. Most importantly, she didn't want to drag everyone down because of her. Yes. Great physician Cheng, you're the best. You're the best in the world. Chu Qingyan smiled, revealing her neat white teeth. Just now, I thought you were going to run away. Cheng Yanluo glared at her in annoyance. She didn't want to talk to her anymore. At this moment, Xiuji came back on his horse. Chu Qingyan saw him coming back alone from afar. His hands were empty. She leaned against a tree trunk and raised her eyebrows. Why are you back so soon? Where's Sui? Xiuji hurriedly dismounted from his horse and ran to her in the blink of an eye. Master, something happened. Just now, this subordinate and Su Yi went to the village in front. Before we arrived, we heard fighting sounds. When we got closer, we saw Huoling and the others being besieged. There were too many killers, so Su Yi asked me to come back and report first. He's going to wait and see. His words made Chu Qingyan straighten her back in an instant. She quickly asked, "What about His Highness?" "His Highness isn't with Huoling and the others. I think Huoling brought a small group of people to the village. By the way, when this subordinate came back, I saw a group of people in black at the foot of the mountain not far away. I came back in a hurry and didn't have time to check. I don't know if His Highness is there." Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. She looked worried, but she still forced herself to calm down. "How many killers are there with Huoling?" "At least 20 or 30. Huoling only brought 4 or 5 people with him." Shuji thought for a moment. Just by listening to this number, it was obvious that the other side was coming aggressively. Needless to say, Big Ice Cube was also in a killing situation. Chu Qingyan made a prompt decision. "Shuji, you take a group of people to support Huoling. Jean Exon, you take the rest of the people and come with me. We're going to find His Highness." Shuji and Jean Xian immediately responded. Without waiting for an explanation, they jumped on their horses. Chu Qingyan and Qingyan Luo immediately got on their horses and rushed forward. Since they were here, they must have sent all their elite killers. Big Ice Cube might be in danger. She had to get there as soon as possible. The wind whistled, mixed with the clear sound of a spear piercing through the air. Xiao Su's eyebrows twitched. He turned around and blocked the sharp spear with his sword. The man with thick eyebrows frowned. He was about to use his strength, but he was bounced back by the force of his wrist. The man with thick eyebrows somersaulted in the air and landed steadily. Not long after, he once again took the initiative to rush towards Xiao Su. He wielded the long spear with ease, and his moves were very fast. Stabbing, flicking, and pressing, his strength was very sufficient. The profoundness of the spear lay in its flexibility and versatility, as well as its ability to suppress thousands of caddies. The opponent's internal force was strong. After a few moves, Xiao Su noticed it. During the fight, he could not help but seriously examine the opponent. This group of killers did not cover their faces. They openly showed their faces as if they were not afraid of being recognized. Their faces were rough, their bodies were strong, and their martial arts were strong. So, although their martial arts were not as good as Xiao Lai's, they were strong and could withstand a beating. The man with thick eyebrows in front of him was steady. Although his moves were changeable, he could basically figure it out after a round of fighting. It was just that fighting with him consumed a lot of physical strength. "Were you sent by Pang Huang?" After the sword and spear separated, Xiao Su said lightly. The man with thick eyebrows was stunned. He did not expect that Xiao Su would be able to guess his identity. But when he remembered Xiao Su's reputation, he was not surprised. The King of England has good eyesight. He took a step forward and was about to make another move, but then he remembered His Highness the Crown Prince's order and stopped. The man with thick eyebrows sneered. "It's better to cut the Gordian knot." He waved his hand and the killers with iron chains immediately surrounded him. "The King of England, this chain formation was specially created for you. It would be a pity if you don't try it." Xiao Su glanced at these people. His eyes flashed with a dark light. At this time, the sound of horse hooves came from afar. The man with thick eyebrows frowned. "Reinforcements." Xiao Su also heard the sound. He suddenly felt something and turned around. He saw a familiar figure standing proudly on the back of the horse. His left hand held a bow and his right hand pulled the bowstring. His red clothes were whiter than snow and his black hair was flying. Chapter 879. The moment Xiao Su saw who it was, he was stunned. Why was this little guy here? Chu Qingyan heaved a sigh of relief as she looked at the ice cube that was surrounded by layers of ice. Although it was stained with blood, it seemed to belong to someone else. She turned to look at the man with thick eyebrows and pointed the arrow in her hand at him. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. She still understood this principle. Don't act rashly. She stood on the horse and approached the crowd. When the man with thick eyebrows heard Chu Qingyan's words, he sneered, "Where did this brat come from? He's really overestimating himself." In his eyes, this Sichuan only had Xiao Su as an opponent. He did not even put Chu Qingyan in his eyes and directly ordered his subordinates in the chain formation, "Take down Xiao Su." As soon as his voice fell, the sound of something piercing through the air was heard. The man with thick eyebrows saw a white light flying towards him from the corner of his eye. He immediately dodged, but the arrow brushed past his shoulder and pierced into the tree behind him. If he had not dodged quickly, it would have pierced his chest. He looked up in surprise at the person he did not put in his eyes just now. Her red clothes were fluttering. At this moment, she had drawn her bow again, but there was not only one arrow on the string, but 3. The man with thick eyebrows narrowed his eyes, and a trace of contempt flashed past his eyes. Although the arrow just now had stunned him, to shoot 3 arrows at the same time without a certain level of ability would only be a joke. There was no lethality at all. Just as he looked over, the 3 arrows had already left the bowstring and were flying towards him. They were aimed at his head, shoulder, and chest, all of which were vital points. Her imposing manner was even more overbearing than before. Her speed was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, she was in front of him. The man with thick eyebrows immediately raised his spear to block, but he did not expect that although the youth did not look strong, every arrow seemed to carry 1,000 pounds of force. The hand holding the spear shook, and his arm went numb. He could not dodge the last arrow. A mist of blood spurted out. The arrow pierced his shoulder, and blood dyed it red. The man with thick eyebrows couldn't care less about the pain. He only felt at a loss. He had actually been tricked by a brat. He looked at her in disbelief, only to see her looking at him coldly, as if she was looking at a dead person. The man with thick eyebrows was shocked by the look in her eyes. She was young, but she had a maturity that did not match. One couldn't blame him for reacting this way. After all, the men of the southern Sichuan grew up on horseback. Riding a horse and shooting an arrow was nothing difficult for them. They had always thought that no one could surpass them in archery, let alone the weak Sichuan people. However, this person's archery skills were not inferior to their most powerful experts. The man with thick eyebrows forgot to react. Xiao Su was originally distracted by observing the two of them, but when he realized that the little fellow was not at a disadvantage, he turned his attention to the chain formation that was supposedly developed for him. Each iron chain was as thick as an arm. It looked very heavy, but in the hands of these assassins, they were able to use it with ease. They did not find it strenuous at all. They threw the iron chains at Xiao Su, wanting to trap him. Xiao Su held his sword and swam around freely. When the assassins saw this, they immediately changed their strategy. They threw one end of the iron chain to their partner, straightened it, and then threw it at Xiao Su, wanting to use this as a pretext to trap him. Xiao Su flew up, avoiding the iron chains. When he landed, he was already standing on top of the iron chain. The sword in his hand quickly swung at the nearest assassin. That assassin bent his body to dodge, flipping in midair. The iron chain loosened, and Xiao Su flew down from his face. Then, very quickly, the chain formation changed again. All the assassins suddenly ran around Xiao Su, and the iron chains in their hands circled around Xiao Su, wanting to take the opportunity to tie him up. On Chu Qingyan's side, when she drew her bow for the second time, Jin Xian and the others had already arrived. They drew their swords and joined the battle, helping Turin and the others to kill the enemies. Just now, their master had run too fast, and they could not catch up. At this time, she stared in the direction of the man with thick eyebrows, and a light flashed in her eyes. Later, you won't be able to escape so easily. She drew her bow twice in a row, but the man with thick eyebrows vigilantly dodged. Seeing that he had been unknowingly lured to the side and had no time to deal with the big ice cube, she narrowed her eyes in satisfaction. When she arrived just now, she saw the man with thick eyebrows fighting with the big ice cube. Although his martial arts were not as good as the big ice cube, if she wanted to fight with him, it would take a lot of effort, so she directly took over this person. The first 4 arrows made the man with thick eyebrows a lot more vigilant, but the next few arrows were not as powerful as before, and the direction of his aim was also off, so the man with thick eyebrows gradually let down his guard. He looked at Chu Qingyan provocatively. It seemed like he had overestimated this little brat. He did not have enough stamina and would not be able to achieve great things. Just now, he had compared him to the crown prince, But now it seemed that he did not even have the qualifications to be a target for the crown prince. Seeing the man with thick eyebrows relax, Chu Qingyan curled her lips. She did not know when, but her hands were filled with 3 arrows. She aimed and released. The man with thick eyebrows easily hit them down. When he was about to laugh at Chu Qingyan, he did not know when, but there was an arrow in front of his eyes. He subconsciously wanted to wave his spear, but his arm could not move. There was no chance for him to react at all. He could only watch as the arrow pierced his chest and then pierced his heart. The intense pain made the man with thick eyebrows weak. He knelt on one knee, and the spear in his hand was pressed against the ground, so that he would not fall to the ground. Blood flowed from his mouth. He stared at Chu Qingyan and spat out a sentence with great effort. Why? This question was filled with disbelief and helplessness. Chu Qingyan had already put away her bow and arrow. She took a step forward and sat back on the horse's back, comforting the obedient horse. When she heard his question, she looked at him and smiled. The first arrow was a warning, but you didn't listen. The second arrow was to intimidate you. However, the following arrows were a smokescreen to make you lower your guard. The last arrow was the fatal one. That's right, I know you still want to ask, why can't your hand move? When Chu Qingyan finished speaking, the man with thick eyebrows opened his eyes full of doubts. Chu Qingyan grinned like a mischievous youth. She played with the arrow in her hand and said slowly, "Since you are so sincere in wanting to know, then I will be merciful and tell you. The arrow in your shoulder was part of my plan. Every arrow that comes after that will drain the strength of your arm. Do you know that when an arm is injured and losing blood, it will cause muscle paralysis if you keep waving your arm around?" Although it was easy to say, it was not easy to control the direction of each arrow, the strength of each arrow, and know what moves the opponent would use. When you ignored my first arrow, you began to walk into a dead end. I remember I reminded you. Don't act rashly. Chu Qingyan smiled sweetly, but the words she said were full of dominance. Chapter 880. When the thick-browed man heard her domineering words, he no longer felt arrogant. He never thought that this youth would be so scheming. The moment she saw him, she had already set up a trap. Wait a minute, how did she know how he would block it? The words were in his mouth, but his eyes quickly dimmed and he didn't ask. To be able to set up a trap in such a short time, this question was no longer a problem. It wasn't that the Sichuan didn't have any talents, it was just that he hadn't met one yet. Who are you? The thick-browed man's hoarse voice made Chu Qingyan raise her eyebrows. Chu Qingyan. The man with thick eyebrows repeated the 2 words in his mouth and sighed softly. He had to let the crown prince know about such a clever opponent. Unfortunately, he was all ready. If he hadn't underestimated his opponent, how could he have lost? He was the crown prince's bravest warrior. But many times, losing was this simple. It was just that when you thought it was simple, you let your guard down and even lost your life. Chu Qingyan looked at the person who was already dead on the ground. She rode her horse closer and a trace of admiration flashed through her eyes. If the thick-browed man didn't think too highly of himself, he wouldn't have lost so quickly. However, she always liked to solve things as quickly as possible, so she withdrew her gaze and looked at the chain formation. Because the 2 of them had already retreated far away from the chain formation and had only fought for a short time, no one noticed that the thick-browed man had died. At this time, Xiao Su had already seen through the chain formation's weakness, so he didn't have the patience to practice with them. The soft sword in his hand trembled and immediately emitted a silver light. He injected his internal strength into it and it cut through iron like it was mud. The chains broke with a hua-hua sound, and soon the chain formation was broken. The assassins couldn't help but retreat. Following that, Xiao Su's arrows closed in. In the blink of an eye, a large group of people fell. Holding the long sword in his hand, Xiao Su stood in the center. His black robes and silver mask covered his face. He was like an unsheathed ice, so no one dared to approach him. The mountain wind blew, and it was incomparably hot. Surrounding him was the cold silence of the Grim Reaper. It was unknown who shouted, but they discovered that their boss had died. Everyone's hearts were scattered, and they panicked. Although there were many people, they were quickly killed by the fire spirit Gene XN, and the situation quickly became one-sided. After a while, only their people were left on the field. Hualing and the others began to clean up the battlefield and search for clues. Chu Qingyan originally intended to dismount and walk towards Xiao Su. However, when he saw Turin and the others surrounding the person who was reporting to him, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Therefore, he pulled the reins and planned to sneak away. However, the person who was listening to his subordinate's report seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. He asked in a low voice, "Where are you going?" Chu Qingyan felt a chill down her spine. She turned around silently, only to find that the person who spoke was not looking at her at all. However, Turin and the others were already looking at her. No matter what, their eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Xiao Su did not speak again. It was obvious that he wanted to wait for her to speak. She subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of water. "I'm not leaving. I'm just taking a stroll. If I don't see you later, you know the consequences." Xiao Su ignored her and continued to deal with the matter in front of him. Cheng Yenluo, who was at the side, saw Chu Qingyan's shoulders drooping because of these words. She could not help but click her tongue in wonder. This little girl was acting as if she was the most powerful person in the world, but now she was beaten down with just a few words. Sure enough, there was always someone to subdue someone else. At this moment, her smiling eyes met with Ethereal, who was bandaging the wounds of the injured. The smile on her face froze. However, Ethereal seemed to be frightened by her appearance. If he was not busy dealing with the injured, he would have run over to question her. Cheng Yenluo rubbed her nose. "Why are you so surprised? I didn't come for you." She took the medicine box on her and walked to the other side to bandage the injured Xiao Lai cavalry. With so many people, how long would it take for him to get all of them? With Xiao Su's words just now, Chu Qingyan wanted to leave but did not dare to. She felt sullen, but in the end she could only stay obediently. She flipped off her horse and stood beside it. She wanted to walk towards him, but after thinking about it, she stood there and looked at him from afar. Some people said that it was as if they had not seen each other for 3 years. They had not seen each other for 4 days, but she felt as if it had been several years. She unconsciously stroked the horse's head with one hand and then looked at him without blinking. She could hear their conversation from time to time. He was clearly standing there, looking the same as when he left a few days ago, just a little more travel-worn. However, she felt that the big ice block looked even better. Don't ask her. What could she see through the mask? It was not like she had the fiery eyes of truth. If she was annoyed by the questions, she might just reply. It mainly depended on her temperament. If Hua Xiaoli knew her answer, he would definitely laugh at her, saying that beauty was in the eye of the beholder. But she was willing. It was just that her beauty did not seem to care that she was at a loss here. However, she thought about it again. If he did not allow her to follow, why would she have the idea of following him on her own accord? The more she thought about it, the more confident she became. Her back also straightened. However, at this time, the crowd dispersed. Xiao Su swept his gaze across the battlefield with his hands behind his back. His gaze lingered on the thick-browed man's injuries for a moment before he retracted his gaze and turned to walk towards Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan was in the midst of self-hypnosis. When she saw him approaching from the corner of her eye, she immediately stood at attention. She looked like a soldier standing guard. Her eyes darted around, not daring to look at him. It's over. He's here to settle the score. This indifferent gaze, stern face, and powerful footsteps made Chu Qingyan not dare to breathe loudly. He was already close. Chu Qingyan could not withstand the pressure. She closed her eyes and said loudly, I just want to follow you. My legs are on my body. What can you do to me?" Silence. Silence again. Even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Chu Qingyan felt strange. She slowly opened her eyes. There was no one in front of her. Master has left. The Earth Spirit pointed out the direction for her. Chu Qingyan looked in the direction he was pointing. She saw Big Ice slowly walking towards a stream not far away. She slapped her forehead. She had been gloriously ignored by the Big Ice Cube. Cheng Yenluo could not help but laugh. "Little girl, If that thick-browed assassin saw you like this and realized that he was defeated by you, I'm afraid he would regret it so much." When she said this, everyone laughed. The smell of blood in the air seemed to have faded a little. Chu Qingyan lowered her head. She did not do it on purpose. It was just that every time she did something wrong, she would lose her confidence in front of Big Ice. Although she did not feel that she was wrong. She sighed softly. How could she appease Big Ice? It's urgent. Waiting online. Chapter 881. After dilly-dallying for a while, Chu Qingyan finally resigned herself to her fate and followed him. Before she even got close, she could already see a black figure standing on the horizon. The evening wind blew his clothes, and although he was stained with blood, he didn't look disheveled. Instead, he looked more elegant and beautiful, standing aloof from the world. Chu Qingyan sometimes thought, how could such a loyal person be speculated to want to usurp the throne? He was originally a person who didn't care about anything, but every time he had to step into the whirlpool of power and fight with those evil people. Thinking of this, she felt that it wasn't worth it for the big ice cube, but more than that, she felt heartache and sadness. Why are you standing there like a fool? A cold voice sounded and Chu Qingyan turned around. When she looked over again, he had already bent down, rolled up his sleeves, scooped up some water and washed the blood stains on his hands. It must have splashed during the fight just now. Chu Qingyan originally didn't know if she should go forward, but when she heard this, she immediately went forward. She stood by his side and lowered her head to watch him wash his hands unhurriedly. After thinking for a while, she took out a handkerchief and handed it to him. Wipe it. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Seeing her helpless appearance, he wanted to laugh in his heart, but he suppressed it and reached out to take the handkerchief and then wiped the water droplets on his hands. Seeing him expressionlessly take the handkerchief, Chu Qingyan's heart trembled, but her eyes couldn't help but fall on his hands. This was a pair of well-defined, slender and fair hands. Each finger was long and straight. If it was in the modern world, this pair of hands would be very suitable for playing the piano. It was so beautiful that with just one look, she couldn't bear to look away. At this moment, Xiao Su had already stood up. He didn't even look at her and ignored her once again as he turned to leave. This place was further away from Turin and the rest, so after being stunned for a while, Chu Qingyan immediately mustered up her courage to run in front of him and stop him. Big Ice Cube, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't keep it to yourself. It's so uncomfortable to look at it. If you want to hit or scold me, I'll accept it. Only then did Xiao Su's gaze fall on the person in front of him. He saw that her head was slightly lowered and her fingers were clasped in front of her. She subconsciously made circles and looked very apologetic. Why would I hit or scold you? Xiao Su said mildly. Chu Qingyan knew that he was deliberately pretending to be confused. She wanted to raise her head and glare at him, but she knew that at this time, it was necessary to show weakness. Therefore, she took a step forward and reached out to hug his arm. Half whining and half blaming herself, she said, Okay, don't be angry with me. Don't be angry. Hearing her words, Xiao Su couldn't help but be amused. Was he that kind of person? However, his hardened heart almost softened when he saw her coquettish smile and her coquettishness. But when he thought of how she had secretly left Jiangnan and followed him here, the signs of softening disappeared once again. He pulled his arm out of her embrace and said with an indifferent expression, If you go back now, I'll let bygones be bygones. Chu Qingyan looked at him as if she was stuck. This was the first time he had been so cold to her since they came to Jiangnan. She had wanted to soften his heart, but at this moment, she suddenly felt bitter. She felt wronged. She had done so much just to be with him. She would share the joys and hardships. She didn't want him to only be happy with her and resist the disaster alone. Who knew if they could win this battle? It wasn't like children playing house. If they won, they wouldn't get hurt. If they lost, they wouldn't feel despair. She was really afraid that she would never see him again. But he actually gave her that attitude and didn't understand her at all. Who exactly did she come all the way here for? Seeing her accusing gaze and her gradually reddening eyes, Xiao Su's fingers curled slightly. In the end, he forced himself to ignore her grievances. After saying that, he brushed past her shoulder and left. I'll give you one night to think about it. Tomorrow morning, I'll send someone to send you back. At this time, he couldn't indulge her and could only harden his heart. Boo-hoo, she sobbed softly and tried her best to suppress her breathing, but it was as if the cold snow and rain had drilled into his heart. He pursed his lips. He had groomed her in the hope that one day, she would stand by his side and go through thick and thin with him. But when that day really came, he didn't want to see her follow him through the wind and fire. Because the person he cherished the most should be covered in silk and satin, with endless glory and wealth, and a peaceful and happy life. So, he hardened his heart for a moment. Perhaps he might make her sad, but in exchange for a lifetime of peace, he was willing. Boo-hoo, it was as if she was covering her mouth, but it leaked out. In the end, she gave up suppressing her emotions and finally cried out. If he had the chance to come back alive, he would come back and explain to her. If not, then he thought that she would live well. She was a lucky girl with a lot of worries around her. He wouldn't let her suffer. Boo-hoo, he knew that she was a strong and sensible girl. If not for his appearance, she wouldn't have been involved in this bloody storm. So he believed that she would work hard to live a happy and healthy life. However, after taking 2 steps forward, he couldn't go any further. The words he used to convince himself became light and weightless in her despair, as if she had been abandoned by everyone. He suddenly laughed at himself. He told himself that he couldn't be soft-hearted, so he said so many words to himself. But when she appeared, all his self-hypnosis was meaningless. He knew that the best thing for her was to keep her far away. But knowing it was one thing and doing it was another. Because no one could resist the only warmth in this world. Xiao Su turned around and walked to the person who was crying. Her eyes were red like a rabbit's. Why are you crying so much? Many words lingered in his throat, but when he finally spoke, they turned into a soft murmur. Chu Qingyan was crying uncontrollably. She thought that he would never come back after leaving, so she tried to use crying to soften his heart. Who knew that it would turn out to be true? The more she cried, the more aggrieved she felt, and the more aggrieved she felt. Then she was immersed in the sadness of not wanting her anymore. When she heard his voice, she was surprised, happy, and resentful. She said pitifully, "Because I'm made of water." When Xiao Su heard this, he was angry and amused. In the end, he sighed and reached out to pull her into his arms. You're already an adult, but you're crying just like that. Where's your shame? When Chu Qingyan heard his words, her tears flowed again. Hubby is going to run away. What's the use of being shameless? After saying this, she didn't wait for him to reply and said in a sobbing tone, Didn't you not want me anymore? Why did you come back? Xiao Su hugged her tightly and looked at her affectionately. Silly girl, I missed you. Chapter 882. All the grievances became unimportant because of the words I miss you very much. She was so stunned that she forgot to cry. In front of her, the familiar scent surrounded her nose. His warm skin made her slowly soften her body. She reached out and hugged him back. Her voice was hoarse and her eyes were red as she whispered softly, I miss you very much too. What answered her was an even more forceful hug. Tears came out of her eyes again. This time, it was not because of sadness or grievances, but because of joy from the bottom of her heart. Although the big ice cube would occasionally say something that he did not think was sweet, but it was rare for him to express his emotions so directly. If you miss me, why are you willing to let me stay? At this moment, she grabbed the clothes behind his back and complained softly. Of course, she knew that he did not want her to suffer with him. But how could a person who had fallen into the pit of love be so rational? Xiao Su stroked her head gently. Her smooth hair was the softness that wrapped around his fingertips in the past. He had underestimated the taste of missing her. Although he did not want to think about it on the way here and made himself busy so that he did not think about her, as long as he stopped and was free, her face and her voice would flash in front of his eyes and appear in his ears. At this moment, let him lose to his own warmth. He did not answer her and asked instead, Did you get someone to impersonate the people from Jiangnan? She did not expect him to suddenly mention this matter. She coughed lightly and replied. You managed to fool the people I sent. You must have drugged them? Xiao Su continued. The big ice cube was indeed able to predict things. She replied unnaturally. If it wasn't for the ambush this time, you wouldn't have appeared. Instead, you would have waited until you were on the battlefield? Xiao Su seemed to have seen through her plan. His tone was much calmer than before. Her voice was so low that even mosquitoes could barely hear it. After answering, she didn't wait for him to ask again. She immediately lifted her head from his embrace and glared at him. I'm telling you, you don't have to persuade me. I won't go back. Hearing her words, Xiao Su's expression turned a little pale. He didn't leave, but that didn't mean he had changed his mind. He let go of her hand and took a step back. His eyes were stern as he said, I've made up my mind. Knowing that she wouldn't cry anymore, Xiao Su was prepared to leave for real this time. How could Chu Qingyan allow him to leave? She immediately went forward and burrowed into his embrace. What does your decision have to do with me? I won't listen, I won't listen, I won't listen. Seeing her shaking her head like a rattle drum while hugging him with all her might, his anger dissipated because of her naughty appearance. Your body is dirty. Don't rub it anymore. His tone was rather helpless. The sternness that he had put on earlier had vanished. Chu Qingyan snorted coldly. Just now, he had ignored her wishes and hugged her in his arms. Now, he was saying these words. What was he doing earlier? Only officials were allowed to set fires, but commoners were not allowed to light lamps. I won't listen. I want to. Not only do I want to rub it against you, I want to bite you. As she said that, she lifted her head and bit his chin hard. She was close to him and he wasn't guarded against her. He was suddenly bitten. Xiao Su felt the pain. Looking down, he saw her with her hands on her hips and smiling at him delightedly. Her bright and beautiful smile made his heart itch. His throat tightened. He put one hand on her shoulder and the other on her waist. His voice was hoarse as he said, Don't think about running away after being bitten. Chu Qingyan had the intention to do so, but she didn't expect that he had already caught her. It was too late to run. At this moment, she felt pain on her lips. Her eyes widened as she looked at the enlarged black eyes in front of her. That pair of grape-like black eyes were like a huge whirlpool, causing her to become absent-minded. And at this moment, Xiao Su was already on top of her lips and teeth. They hadn't seen each other for a few days and she missed him so much that it was like a disaster. He had only wanted to punish her, but in the end, it changed. It seemed like from a long time ago, he only wanted to see her try her best to please him in the prince's palace and live on. Or he wanted to see the prudent youth in Mao village reveal the innocence that a 10-year-old should have. But he didn't want to watch the play, but the person who was playing the chess piece fell into the game. When he first noticed it, he could choose to leave. But time and time again, he was infected by her smile, her strength, her innocence, and her bravery and stopped in his tracks. Then, he couldn't pull himself away anymore. The moment his lips touched hers, he already couldn't resist that restless heart of his. It was like a person who had walked in the desert for many days and finally welcomed a good rain. Hard work, reluctance, longing, wanting to keep her, finally turned into a burning passion. Chu Qingyan wanted to push him away at first. After all, she still remembered that there were dozens of people on the other side. Those were people that she was familiar with. They weren't blocks of wood. But being entangled by him, or being engulfed by such a blazing flame, she could only sink with him in the end. Many times, one side took the initiative, but in the end, it didn't matter who took the initiative. It couldn't be distinguished. When they separated, Chu Qingyan remembered Yen Luo and the others. She immediately buried her face in his chest. This time, she really didn't have the face to see anyone. Xiao Su was satisfied, but unfortunately, his face was covered by the silver mask, so she couldn't see his expression at this time. She only felt that his eyes were astonishingly bright. At this moment, he felt the person in his arms tugging at his clothes. He couldn't help but lower his head. Chu Qingyan wanted to say something, but she saw the passion in his eyes that hadn't subsided. Her originally blushing face was once again covered by the sunset glow, and she forgot what she wanted to say. Perhaps he remembered that there were still subordinates around, so he only let go when he felt that she could stand steadily. Her strength had been sapped away by him, and she could barely stand with her weak legs. Fortunately, he still had a sense of propriety, and his clothes were still intact. But when she looked up, she realized that the two of them were standing under a tree at some point, and the tree happened to block their figures. Could it be that big ice cube had moved her position while carrying her? She was so engrossed in her feelings that she didn't realize it at all. However, she was really impressed that the big ice cube could still consider the direction when doing that thing. Both of them were calming the surging feelings in their bodies. Although they didn't speak, they didn't feel uncomfortable. At this moment, she remembered what she wanted to say just now. She raised her hand and poked his arm again. When he looked at her, she said slowly, "Hey, you can't be angry anymore. You can't let me go back." Xiao Su tidied her messy hair and looked at her with an unreadable expression. "What do you think?" His ambiguous words made it hard for her to guess what he meant. Chu Qingyan harumphed. She grabbed his clothes and said fiercely, "I don't care. Anyway, you've already taken advantage of me. You can't just turn your back on me." Unfortunately, the person in front of her was unmoved. Her face stiffened, and she thought that she could only throw out her last resort. She loosened her grip and helped him tidy his collar. She smiled coquettishly. "If you're willing, I'll follow you. You can have as much tofu as you want." "Do you think I'm someone who can be bribed so easily?" Xiao Su glanced at her, patted her head, and then turned to leave without any reluctance. Chu Qingyan bit her sleeves and stomped her feet. She was already so thick-skinned, but why was Big Ice Cube still so stubborn? He really suffered a double loss. How thick-skinned was she? Chapter 883. When Cheng Yanluo saw that Chu Qingyan's eyes were red and her lips were red, she knew what she had just experienced. However, it seemed like she didn't succeed. "Hey, does your big ice cube really have a heart of stone?" She poked Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan propped her cheeks with both hands and nodded helplessly. Then she shook her head. Cheng Yanluo couldn't figure out what she meant. "Don't keep me in suspense. Tell me." Chu Qingyan sighed bitterly and said, "He's just trying to keep me in suspense. What can I do?" Cheng Yanluo giggled. "I think your big ice cube is the only one who can deal with you." Chu Qingyan saw that Cheng Yanluo didn't comfort her and instead mocked her. She couldn't help but huff, "You're still laughing. If I can't stay, don't think about accompanying your hollow." Cheng Yanluo coughed softly and immediately turned to check on the injured. At this time, it was better not to provoke the little lass. At this time, Hua Ling and Su Yi returned with their men. Although everyone was present, many of them were injured to varying degrees. Hua Ling walked towards his master. When he saw that he wasn't injured, he sighed in relief. However, when he saw that the person who shouldn't be here was standing in front of him perfectly fine, his anger rose again. Why was the young princess consort here? He originally thought that Su Yi and the others were sent by the young princess consort to protect his master. He didn't expect that the real master would also be here. He secretly gave Chu Qingyan a thumbs up. Chu Qingyan caught it out of the corner of her eye and winked at him. Hua Ling immediately stood up when he felt the cold gaze on him. He then reported to his master what had happened in the village. At this time, Su Yi and the others also walked to their master to report. Chu Qingyan saw their injuries and her face immediately sank. "Go to Ethereal and Yanluo to check on their injuries first. Treat them first." Everyone nodded and dispersed. Only the lightly injured Su Yi remained. "What happened?" Chu Qingyan asked. Su Yi reported, "When this subordinate and Su Heir went to the village, we found that Huoling and the others were also there. In order to avoid meeting them, we hid first and watched them go in. Originally, we wanted to wait for them to come out before we acted, but we didn't expect that the villagers would suddenly take out their weapons and attack Huoling and the others. So this subordinate asked Su Heir to come back and report to you first. The other side had too many people, but with our reinforcement, the other side didn't take too much advantage. Later, Someone appeared and called the remaining assassins away, so we came back. What about the original villagers? Chu Qingyan felt that something was amiss. They were all killed. The killer disguised himself as them and set up a trap. Su Yi showed a trace of pity. Chu Qingyan closed her eyes. What a sin! Over at Xiao Su's side. You're saying that someone called the assassins away? Xiao Su frowned. Yes, otherwise the subordinates' people would have been delayed for a long time. Huoling replied truthfully. Xiao Su pondered. At that time, it should be the little guy who killed the leader of the assassins, so those people stopped in advance. Master, what should we do now? Turan asked. Xiao Su glanced at the scene. The situation was not very optimistic. He waved his hand and ordered, "Find a clean place to rest for the night." Turan and Huoling both took the order and retreated. At night, everyone made a fire by the stream. Because this time, the enemy who was hiding in the dark was defeated, so they were not worried that they would come to find them so soon. The dry food was finished. When they went to the village to buy food, they encountered this incident. So Xiao Lai, who was not injured, took a bow and arrow and went into the deep forest to hunt a few rabbits and pheasants. Jin Xian also went into the water to catch some fish. Chu Qingyan and Qing Yenluo helped to pluck the feathers and clean them, then roasted them over the fire. It was not that they could not do this normally, but they could not be distracted on the road, so it was faster to eat dry food. The fragrance of the meat quickly spread. The few who were punished by Chu Qingyan to look at the stream immediately turned their heads. Huoling was helping to apply seasoning. Seeing such an interesting scene, he could not help but ask with a smile, "Little princess consort, what did they do?" Cheng Yenluo was laughing at this moment. Hearing that, she answered for Chu Qingyan, They dropped the ball at the crucial moment, so the little girl is punishing them." Jean Exon continued from the side, "They ran away when they were resting. Coincidentally, something happened, so Master brought us here. Now that the dust has settled, they came to find us." These words made everyone present unable to restrain their laughter. Xiaohai and the others immediately blamed Jean Exon. "No one will think you are mute if you don't speak. Look, so many people are laughing at us." Su Yi smiled. "Master, they helped us catch a lot of fish and birds just now. Please forgive them." Because these few had been causing trouble in the residence all day, Xiao Qi helped to watch over them, so Su Yi and the others also had feelings for them. They could not help but plead for leniency on their behalf. Hearing this, Xiaohai and the little troublemakers turned around and looked at their master with watery eyes. Chu Qingyan gave a cold snort, and they immediately turned their heads away pitifully. Master was really angry. What should they do? Actually, Chu Qingyan was no longer angry, but she felt that she had to set some rules for them. Otherwise, if they were to be so lax every time, if an accident happened in the future and she was not by their side, then they would really have no one to help them. Seeing that the punishment was more or less over, Chu Qingyan still waved at them with a stern face. "Come here." When the few heard this, their hearts almost bloomed with joy, but they could not express it too much. Otherwise, they would have to look at the stream again. They walked over with their heads bowed, but their eyes would occasionally glance at the fire. This pitiful and cute appearance was simply too adorable, but the people did not want to give food to them. After all, there was still the big Buddha, the young princess consort, present. Moreover, they were very curious about how the young princess consort would train these seemingly powerful birds and beasts. This scene was very rare. How could Chu Qingyan not know what they were thinking? She casually picked up a roasted chicken and played with the fork, waving it in front of their eyes. When she saw that she had attracted all their attention and made them drool, she said, "Let's go. Do you remember what I said?" They nodded. "Are you still going to run around?" They shook their heads. "If you continue to make people worry, you will go back to Jiangnan?" They nodded. Chu Qingyan then handed the roasted chicken to them. "It's good that you have remembered it. Take it and eat." As if they had been pardoned, the few of them happily took it. Others even gave them fish, and they accepted it reservedly because their master said that they had to be polite. Then, they ran to the side and ate heartily. After finishing these few, Chu Qingyan took another roasted chicken and walked in front of a certain someone. She grinned as she came to his side and handed him a large drumstick. A certain someone glanced at her hand and said faintly, "This is the second one." Chu Qingyan did not understand, but then she quickly understood. Big Ice Cube was jealous that the first one she roasted was given to Little Hai and the others. This vinegar was too ridiculous. Chapter 884. This kind of night was quiet and peaceful. If they hadn't experienced that battle, it would have been a beautiful day. Chu Qingyan ate meat and looked at the night sky. She sighed, "If only we had wine now." A good night should be paired with good wine. As soon as she finished speaking, a chestnut fell on her head. She immediately covered her head and turned to glare at the person beside her. "You're not allowed to drink." Xiao Su glanced at her coldly. She wanted to refute, but remembered that he still had her life in his hands. She rubbed her nose and didn't argue anymore. Xiao Su stared at her for a while, then reached out to caress her face. Chu Qingyan was stunned. She quickly whispered, Don't. There are many people watching here." He shook his head helplessly after she finished speaking. He had already retracted his hand, but there was an extra fish bone on his fingertip. She must have accidentally touched it just now. She blushed with shame at her own thoughts. After a while, she suddenly thought of something. She immediately put down the meat and said, "Big Ice Cube, don't you think that the ambush this time is very strange? Tell me." Xiao Su didn't expect her to suddenly mention this matter. He leaned against the tree trunk and looked at her. Chu Qingyan immediately said, "Think about it. If you didn't go to Jiangnan, you should be in Lian City." Sun Quan also secretly came to Jiangnan to announce the imperial edict. Logically speaking, even if those people wanted to ambush you, they couldn't have done it here. Moreover, they calculated the time and waited for you in advance. Continue. The corners of Xiao Su's eyes lifted slightly. His gaze deepened. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan was motivated. She thought that if she analyzed it well, maybe the Big Ice Cube wouldn't send her back. The people who came to assassinate you are from Nansong, but they can't be so familiar with Sichuan's terrain to specially come here. I'm guessing that Nansong already knew that you weren't in Lian City, or that someone leaked this matter to them. That's why they could calculate your route so accurately. She took her time to analyze it. If it's the former, then we can only say that Nansong's reach is too far. They can clearly see our every move. If it's the latter, then it means that someone knows our whereabouts. They're keeping it a secret and are waiting for this moment to make their move. This is simply too terrifying. Xiao Su fell into deep thought because of her words. The little fellow's words made some sense. He was also guessing the intention of the person behind today's incident. The assassins who came this time were brazen. It would take some time for them to come here, not to mention coming here from the front lines. One thing that the little fellow did not expect was that these people would set off at least earlier than the imperial edict. Who was it that had guessed Xiao Rant's defeat from the very beginning, as well as that imperial father would have him accept the imperial edict? What was the motive of the person hiding behind this? Was it to help Nansong go against Sichuan, or did he have other motives? If it was purely to go against Sichuan, then he would be able to block soldiers with arms and water with an earthware without any worries. He was afraid that it was not as simple as he imagined. Seeing that Xiao Su was deep in thought, Chu Qingyan did not say anything to disturb him. Instead, she sat quietly at the side, occasionally tearing off a piece of meat to feed Xiaohai and Xiaofan. At this moment, Qingyan Luo was washing gauze by the stream. Her mind was drifting away, and no one knew what she was thinking. When she came back to her senses, she realized that there was a reflection in the water. She subconsciously turned around and saw Ethereal dressed in white. She was momentarily stunned. She did not know how long he had been standing behind her. For a moment, she did not know what to say, so she silently lowered her head and washed the gauze over and over again. Xiaoyan, why are you and the young princess consort here? Ethereal saw that her back was facing him, as if she did not care about his appearance at all. His heart sank, and he did not control his tone well, blurting out his thoughts. Cheng Yinluo's hands paused, and she felt a little guilty. She was afraid that he would ask about this matter, so she was thinking of an excuse to get away with it. Perhaps she took too long to think, so Ethereal thought that she did not want to talk to him again. His heart ached and he gave up asking. His tone became calm again. Didn't I tell you that the battlefield is not a place for children to play house? A white knife goes in and a red knife comes out. You may die in the blink of an eye. Master will let the young princess consort go back. At that time, you will go back with her. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. However, the person who had been silent all this time suddenly stood up. She lowered her eyes, and her long hair fell down to cover her cheeks. Her expression could not be seen clearly, but he heard her snort softly, and then her voice was cold. Murong-ju, aren't you thinking too much? I won't deny that this little girl came for your master, but I didn't come with her for you. I'm a doctor, and I treat all kinds of diseases and illnesses. Wherever I go, I'm just fulfilling my responsibility as a doctor. So, don't think too much and don't drive me away. When the time is right, I will naturally leave. Her cold and emotionless voice was like a sharp ice sword piercing into his heart on this hot and dry night. He smiled bitterly. Sure enough, he was thinking too much. He still thought that she was. That was why he came here to say those words, but he did not expect that he would drive the two of them apart again. But other things aside, he could not allow her to stay in such a dangerous place. Xiaoyan, no matter what the reason is, I will not neglect your safety. Tomorrow I will ask Master to send you back. Ethereal said and turned around again. Murong-ju, you can't be so selfish. Cheng Yinluo gritted her teeth. With his back to her, Ethereal looked up at the night sky with the moon and sparse stars. His expression was lonely, but his tone was very determined. Xiaoyan, you can blame me or blame me, but I won't let you be willful in this matter. After saying that, Ethereal walked away. After he left, Cheng Yinluo clenched her hands. Her drooping hair covered her pair of painful eyes. She did not want to say those hurtful words, but in order not to let him see through her, she did not mean what she said. But she did not expect that he would still do it. Her heart was in a mess. Why did she insist on the answer in her heart? She should stay far away from him. It was already late at night, and the forest was very quiet. Xiao Su covered the person sleeping beside him with his coat. Although the night in the mountains was very cold, there were 3 small snow wolves lying beside her. Their fur was warm enough to keep her warm. At this moment, Hua Ling stood by the side and glanced at the sleeping young princess consort. Then he asked in a low voice, Master, are you really going to send the young princess consort back tomorrow? Do you really want her to stay? Xiao Su looked at him. Hua Ling scratched his head. This subordinate thinks that with the young princess consort by your side, your heart will be more at ease. In fact, he wanted to say that the person who wanted the young princess consort to stay the most was his master, but he had too many concerns. When was this prince's heart not at ease when she was not around? Xiao Su narrowed his eyes and said in a stern tone. Chapter 885. His master's eyes were as indifferent as ice. Hua Ling's thoughts were instantly extinguished. He swallowed a mouthful of water before stuttering. This subordinate thought too much. After speaking, Hua Ling retreated. Turin saw him come back with his tail between his legs and couldn't help curling his lips into a smile. Hua Ling had kicked an iron plate in front of his master. Seeing Turin teasing him at this time, he wasn't worried. What are you laughing at? Could it be that what I said wasn't what you were thinking? Turin was still smiling. Even if you're right, I wouldn't be so stupid as to go find Master to say this. You clearly know that Master values the little princess' safety more than anything else, yet you still went to ask for trouble. Although he felt that what he said was reasonable, Hua Ling was still angry at this time. He snorted in dissatisfaction. What's so good about hiding it? I just want to see Master go to war without any distractions or regrets. Hearing this, Turin smiled and shook his head. You've been with the little princess for so many years. Don't you understand her personality? Master told her to stay in Jiangnan, didn't she still follow? Since the little princess dared to come, Do you think she wouldn't be prepared? These words hit Hua Ling in the head. His eyes immediately lit up. You're right. I really forget everything when I'm anxious. Turin restrained his smile and looked at the two people lying and sitting under the tree. They were like a pair of jade. In the past, he couldn't understand why his master, who had always been indifferent to others, would treat the little princess differently. Later, he didn't insist on the answer because he found that he was used to seeing his master and the little princess together. Just like this time, he also wanted the little princess to come with him. His master's life was too sad. Only when the little princess was here did he have a trace of life. He had rejected her in the past, but now he was grateful to the heavens that there was such a person by his master's side. Turin withdrew his gaze and didn't pay attention to Hua Ling's happy jumping. He turned around and took up the task of patrolling. The only thing they could do was to protect the safety of the two masters. The firelight illuminated the face of the person under the tree. Xiao Su lowered his head and looked at the person who was slowly approaching. In the end, he didn't want her to be restless, so he took her into his arms. When the sleeping person felt that he had fallen into a safe and familiar embrace, he naturally found a comfortable position and fell asleep without caring about anything else. Xiao Su saw that she had finally quietened down, and his tensed face finally relaxed. His gaze fell on her body, and her long black hair covered the side of her face. He couldn't help but reach out, revealing her bright and beautiful face, and then gently caressed it. In fact, when she appeared, he wanted to do this, but he couldn't let her discover his emotions. Otherwise, she would be fearless and want to stay. He sighed softly. Little fellow, what should I do with you? She couldn't bear to let go. Only by keeping her by his side would he feel at ease, but his side was already a mountain of daggers and a sea of flames. The person, in the face of right and wrong, could they only be selfish once before they could be selfless for the rest of their life? Xiao Su looked at the sparse stars in the sky and the light in his eyes flickered. The sleeping person had a frown on her face. Ding, ding, clang, clang. The sound of swords clashing could be heard everywhere. There were roars, cries, and screams. Chu Qingyan stood in the middle of the crowd with a blank expression. She didn't know how she came here. This was clearly a battlefield. Everyone was fighting with all their might. Some had fierce expressions, some had painful expressions, some had proud expressions, and some were screaming pitifully. She didn't know who was fighting who, but she quickly saw the flags in the crowd. The two words South and West. Her eyes opened wide. This was the battlefield between the southern blue continent and Sichuan? At this time, she saw Turin leading a large number of troops on his horse. She also saw Hua Ling swinging his sword. Could it be that the big ice cube was nearby? She didn't think too much about it and immediately ran towards Turin, but when she took a few steps, she found that the soldiers on the side had passed through her and were stabbing at the people behind her. She was stunned. Everyone acted like they didn't see her as they passed through her body. She tried to speak, but there was no sound at all. What was going on here? Before she could react, a battle horse appeared in front of her. The most important thing was the person sitting on the horse. He was wearing a silver battle robe and had a silver mask on his face. He wasn't angry, but he was like a sword that had just been unsheathed. He had an arrogant aura and killing intent. Her heart filled with joy and she wanted to run towards him, but at this time, an arrow flew through the air and appeared behind him. She immediately shouted for him to be careful, but she forgot that she couldn't speak. The arrow pierced his back and came out of his chest. Everything happened too quickly and she could only watch as he fell down. No, everything was asleep except for the cicadas and crickets that were tirelessly chirping in the fields. When Chu Qingyan opened her eyes covered in sweat, the first thing she saw was the dark sky. Then she turned her head and saw a figure that made her feel at ease. So this was a dream. Luckily it was only a dream. But why would she have this kind of unlucky dream at this time? Could it be that it was a dream left behind by the thick-eyebrowed man? No matter what, having this kind of dream made her feel uneasy at all. Her heart was still thumping wildly, but in this quiet environment, listening to his long breathing, her heart slowly calmed down. Looking at his sleeping face, her eyes turned slightly red. In the end, she reached out her hands to gently hug him and buried her head in his chest. Big Ice Cube, no matter how you chase me away, I will shamelessly follow you. As long as I live, I will be with you. Even if I die, I am not willing to be separated from you. In a temple in the distant mountains, under a lush locust tree, two figures were sitting across from each other. In front of them was a game of chess. Why did we lose again? A white-haired old man complained. The senior monk wearing a plain monk robe smiled. Your heart is not calm. Of course, your chess pieces are not as good as before. The white-haired old man exploded. Who said my heart is not calm? My heart is so calm. The senior monk was still smiling. Then why are you playing chess with this poor monk so late at night? The white-haired old man could not help but touch his nose and smile unnaturally. Isn't the night very good? Wouldn't it be a waste if we don't play a game? The senior monk looked at him calmly. The white-haired old man was quickly defeated. He threw the white chess piece in his hand on the chessboard and stroked his beard. Aren't I worried about that eldest grandson? I've entered the game again. The senior monk took back his chess pieces one by one and smiled benevolently. The King of England is a good man. Moreover, he has a fated person by his side, so everything can be turned into a blessing. The white-haired old man's eyes brightened. Then this granddaughter-in-law is indeed the right one. The senior monk's eyes were unfathomable. Yes or no, everything has its own destiny. The white-haired old man muttered to himself for a moment and then stood up. Where are you going? The senior monk asked. Of course, to sleep. The white-haired old man swaggered back with his hands behind his back. The senior monk looked at his back and smiled while shaking his head. Then he continued to take back his chess pieces. Chapter 886. When she woke up in the morning, there was no trace of Xiao Su beside her. Her drowsiness was immediately awakened, thinking that they had left while she was sleeping. Looking around, she saw the fierce cavalry and big ice block in the middle of the crowd. Only then did she calm down. She went to the stream to wash her face and felt that her body was sticky. She should have sweated from last night's nightmare. Seeing the clear stream in front of her, she really wanted to jump in and wash herself, but it was different now, so she could only endure it. When she came back, everyone was still resting. She couldn't help being surprised. She called out to Hualing, who was walking by, "You're not planning on leaving today?" Hualing said with a serious expression. The brothers were seriously injured this time. Master said to rest for another day and leave tomorrow morning. Chu Qingyan heard this and swept her eyes over everyone. As expected, they were all injured. She nodded at Hualing. All right, you can go do your things. After saying this, Hualing did not immediately leave. Chu Qingyan couldn't help looking at him. If you have something to say, just say it. Hualing rubbed his head with a smile when he heard this. Little princess consort really is smart, immediately guessing that this subordinate has something to say. Stop hemming and hawing. If you have something to say, just say it. Chu Qingyan smiled. Hualing finally spoke. Little princess consort, although it isn't very kind to say this subordinate still hopes that you won't return to Jiangnan. Chu Qingyan was shocked. She thought that they all thought she was a burden and stood on the same side as their master. Why? Although Master doesn't say it, anyone can see that this battle is very troublesome and not easy to fight. Whether we can win or not is another matter. Master has always cared about you. Every time we go out to battle, we have the mentality that we won't be able to come back. Perhaps it is very depressing to say this, but this subordinate still wants to say it. At this time of danger, I hope you can accompany Master. When he said this, Hualing's eyes passed her and looked at the person not far away. His eyes were filled with respect and concern. Chu Qingyan was shocked by his words. She did not know why, but she felt a deep sense of sorrow. War was cruel. It would cause families to break up, and families to become homeless. Life and death were unpredictable. She pursed her lips and nodded solemnly. I'll do my best to stay by his side. With your words, this subordinate can be at ease. At the front line, this subordinate will swear to protect your safety with my life. Hualing's eyes were bright as he straightened his back and spoke word by word. Even after Hualing left, Chu Qingyan still hadn't recovered from the aura he had just released. Perhaps this was the courage of the fierce cavalry. Once he had made up his mind, he vowed to follow him to the death. How fortunate was she to know such a group of loyal souls. While she was distracted, 2 eggs suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. She blinked and saw Yanluo's smiling face. "Little girl, happy birthday." As she spoke, Yanluo gave her a bright smile, then stuffed the eggs in her hands. "I had Jean Exine look for this. I don't know if it's a bird's egg or something else. It's in the wilderness, so just make do with it. As for the noodles, I'll make up for it next time." Chu Qingyan felt a warm sensation in her hands. She lowered her head to look at the small egg, and a sense of happiness welled up in her heart. She had been so focused on Big Ice Cube that she had forgotten that today was her birthday. She said gratefully to Cheng Yanluo, "Thank you. This is already very good. If you have anything to say it to your Big Ice Cube." Cheng Yanluo placed her hands on her shoulders, then helped her turn around and pointed at the person under the tree. "Today, you should go and ask him for a present." Chu Qingyan couldn't help blushing. "That's not very good. What's there to be embarrassed about? Go." Cheng Yanluo pushed her forward, not forgetting to cheer her on. Chu Qingyan had no choice but to slowly walk over. At this moment, the people around Xiao Su saw Chu Qingyan and tactfully retreated. Before they left, they gave her a look of encouragement. She was sweating profusely. Xiao Su saw the person walking towards him. Her long hair hung high behind her head, and her beautiful face was clearly visible. However, there was a hint of hesitation in her usually bright smile. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. "Here, this is for you." She still couldn't bring herself to ask for a present. She wasn't a 3-year-old child, so she didn't hesitate and handed the egg in her hand to him. Xiao Su looked at the egg, but didn't reach out his hand. "Eat too, and you'll be safe." Chu Qingyan was stunned for a moment, then silently withdrew her hand. It turned out that other than her, everyone else remembered her birthday. "Today, I'll get Turin to send you back," Xiao Su said with a slight smile when he saw her embarrassed expression, but his voice was tense. She subconsciously exerted force, and the eggshell broke in her hand. She looked at the person in front of her in disbelief. "You still want me to go back to Jiangnan?" The person in front of him had eyes that were too bright and clear. He couldn't help but avert his gaze and look elsewhere. His tone was indifferent as he said, "Yes." Chu Qingyan's expression immediately turned to anger. "You're actually chasing me away on my birthday?" "Ian." Xiao Su looked at her with a frown. She didn't care about his stern expression. Since he was chasing her away, what was there to be concerned about? "I don't care. I'm not going back. What can you do about it?" "You're only my fiancé in name, but we're not married yet, so you can't restrict my freedom in life." "Fine, you'll go your way and I'll go mine," she said without thinking. If he wanted her to go back wholeheartedly, then she would simply express her attitude. She knew that she had gone overboard with her words, but compared to going back to Jiangnan and anxiously waiting for his news and worrying about his safety, it was better to get the pain over with. "Ein." Xiao Su's anger was mixed with a bit of surprise, helplessness, and solemnity. The unfinished words were persuasion that he didn't know how to continue. Xiao Su suddenly felt that it was a wrong decision not to marry her immediately. Otherwise, he wouldn't be speechless today and be in no position to decide anything for her. Of course, he could force her to go back, but he didn't want to do so, and he couldn't. The two of them were silent, and a sad atmosphere surged between the two of them. Perhaps his reaction made her feel uncertain and guilty. Chu Qingyan hesitated for a moment before reaching out to pull on his sleeve like a child who had done something wrong. "I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. This isn't what I was thinking." She pursed her lips and said in despair, "If you're angry with me, you can choose to ignore me." The person in front of him admitting defeat made Xiao Su's cold heart warm up. He sighed softly. "Ian, I'm not angry." Hearing his response, Chu Qingyan's face lit up. She walked closer and threw herself into his arms, then looked up pitifully. "Then can I not give you a birthday present? You just have to promise me one thing and let me be with you." Chapter 887. Looking at her pitiful kitten, he couldn't bear to be cruel. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were no longer as solemn as before. He deliberately sighed. "How did you know that I prepared a gift for you?" Chu Qingyan was stunned. "You didn't prepare a gift for me?" You? Xiao Su was amused by her reaction. He couldn't help but reach out to pinch her face. The smooth touch made his heart flutter. "Didn't you just say that you didn't want it?" "Whether I wanted it or not is one thing, whether you prepared it or not is another. This is different. I don't care. Even if you didn't prepare a gift for me, you have to agree to my wish. I want to stay by your side. You can't chase me away. If you can't even fulfill this wish of mine, then what's the point of my coming-of-age ceremony?" Chu Qingyan was immersed in the grief and indignation that Big Ice Cube didn't care about her birthday at all. Xiao Su held back his laughter. She even knew how to threaten him. It seemed that her 5 years of growth and wisdom were not in vain. After she finished speaking, he said faintly, "Then are you still going to follow me to the front line?" She looked up in shock. "You're agreeing?" Xiao Su pretended to smile helplessly. "If I don't agree, I'll become a sinner for all eternity. Moreover, even if I get someone to send you back, are you going to sneak away again? Since that's the case, I might as well keep an eye on you. You make it sound like I'm a disobedient child. Let me tell you, I'm coming of age and an adult. You're not allowed to look at me like that." Although her words were fierce, she couldn't hide the joy in her eyes. Xiao Su saw that she was still pretending to be obedient, and a smile appeared in his eyes. She wasn't his subordinate, so he could punish her or order her around. If she really wanted to follow him, he couldn't do anything about it. Forget it, he would just put her in a safe place where he could see her. Their movements were clearly seen by the people nearby. Chu Qingyan was shy, so she pulled him to the side. Today was her birthday. No matter how many things he had to do, he didn't want to be disturbed, so he went along with her. The two of them walked along the stream. The chaotic flowers gradually confuse people's eyes, and only then can the shallow grass not have horse hooves. Along the mountain stream, butterflies danced in the air, and the sunlight was just right. The two of them put aside all the complicated matters of the outside world and walked hand in hand like an ordinary man and woman in the peaceful mountain forest. Chu Qingyan tilted her head and looked at the person beside her. "When we come back, how about we also find a place like this to retire for the rest of our lives?" He had lived in palaces, in the wilderness, in caves, on battlefields, and in dilapidated houses. He had no requirements for where he lived, as long as she was by his side. The longing and yearning in her eyes moved him, and he had some expectations in his heart. "Okay." At this point, he stopped in his tracks and turned to face her. He took out a small box and handed it to her. "What is this?" Chu Qingyan had a vague guess in her heart. "A gift for your coming of age." Xiao Su helped her open it. "Didn't you say that you didn't prepare?" Before she could finish speaking, the box in front of her opened, revealing the thing inside. It became dazzling when it came in contact with the light, emitting a golden glow. She couldn't help but half squint. When she adjusted to the golden light, she opened her eyes. When she saw the thing clearly, Chu Qingyan let out a gasp of admiration. "This is..." A phoenix hairpin lay in the brocade box. It was golden and very beautiful. She reached out and picked it up. When it left the box, it was like a phoenix spreading its wings. Its long tail swayed with its movements, and the feathers were decorated with blood-red beads. Its eyes were 2 small gemstones, and its body was multicolored. It had a beautiful crown, and its long neck was raised high. From afar, it was as red as fire. This was the first time she saw such a dignified and beautiful hairpin with phoenix patterns. "Is this for me?" She was very surprised. Xiao Su didn't answer, but used his actions to prove it. He took the phoenix hairpin from her hand and lifted his hand to loosen the hair tie on her head. Because he often helped her dress up these past few years, he skillfully helped her tie up her hair and then inserted the phoenix hairpin. Then he carefully gathered her hair and used his hand as a comb, smoothing it down her hair. The person in front of her quickly changed his appearance. He was no longer the handsome young man. He took a step back and looked at his masterpiece with rapt attention. Although there weren't many things that he could use, when half of her hair was tied up and the bun was loose, there was a kind of lazy charm. Her hair was beautiful like the clouds. The phoenix hairpin was fixed in the bun, and the golden tassels fell in front of her forehead. It was more charming than expected, luxurious and gentle. The two phoenix's pearls were dotted, and the autumn waters were long. Her black eyebrows were curved and delicate, and the reflection of the water. Willow's slim waist, graceful and hard to find. He always knew that this little fellow's color was beautiful. Just by dressing up a little, it was enough to make people unable to take their eyes off her. This phoenix hairpin was originally intended for you to wear on your wedding day. Now that you're gone, I don't know when I'll be able to put it on for you again. Xiao Su's tone carried a trace of regret. Chu Qingyan opened her eyes. Just now, she only felt the big ice cube's hand fiddling with her hair. Now that there was no mirror, she didn't know what was going on. She only saw a shadow in his eyes. Her charming face was more delicate than a flower. It doesn't matter. We can wait. When that day comes, I'll put it on for you again. Chu Qingyan touched her bun and replied with a smile. Although she felt that it was a pity, what could be better than the two of them being together? Money was easy to find, but a lover was hard to find. This smile dazzled his eyes. Xiao Su gave a rare smile and nodded in agreement. She usually liked to wear red clothes. Now, she was wearing a red dress with golden threads around the edges. Her wrists and the hem of the dress were covered with complicated patterns, adding a touch of nobility. Her hair was half tied up with a golden hairpin. Standing in the wind, the fog behind her was reflected in his eyes. The wedding dress was like a fire burning the horizon, and from then on, it was branded in his heart like cinnabar. This scene made Xiao Su absent-minded for a moment. If it wasn't for this urgent call, perhaps it wouldn't be long before this little fellow put on the wedding dress for him and became his little bride. Chu Qingyan couldn't see her own face. She only felt that the big ice cube in front of her looked a little strange. Thinking that he was regretting the cancellation of the marriage at the last minute, she opened her mouth to appease him. Big ice cube, I don't know if you've heard of a saying? Xiao Su's thoughts and eyes were all on her. Hearing this, he just casually replied, "What saying?" "I'm most afraid of living a mediocre life and comforting myself that ordinary life is precious." This was her favorite saying, and it was very suitable to mention it at this time. Thus, she tilted her head and continued, "Some people have ups and downs. When they think about these things when they're old, they'll feel that their lives are full and exciting. Only after experiencing great winds and waves and being confused, can they have the right to talk about ordinary life. If life is like a cup of water at the beginning, then when they're old, they'll feel that they've lived their whole life in vain." Speaking of this, her eyes were full of sincere smiles. Chapter 888. Xiao Su's attention turned from her to her words. He carefully thought over her words and quickly realized that she was comforting him in a roundabout way. His heart warmed and his hand couldn't help touching her face. Her skin was as smooth as jade, just like the feeling she always gave him. It was very comfortable. His hand was warm, and his fingertips were a little rough. It was the result of holding weapons for many years, but it was this kind of touch that made her feel at ease. She tilted her head and rubbed against his palm like a kitten with a strong sense of dependence. Xiao Su looked at her lovingly and finally couldn't help but raise his hand to help her adjust her hairpin. "Does it look good?" She couldn't help asking with a bit of shyness in her voice. Although she wasn't someone who cared about her appearance, in front of the person she liked, she always wanted to be able to face him in her best state. She tried hard not to show her anticipation, but it still fell into his eyes. He smiled. "Do you want to hear the truth or a lie?" Was this question not easy to answer? Chu Qingyan puffed up her cheeks. "A lie." If the truth was hurtful, then she would listen to the lie first. "It looks very good." A trace of a smile appeared on his lips. Although the lie sounded very comfortable, it was still a lie. She took a deep breath. "Then what about the truth?" "The lie is the truth." Chu Qingyan suddenly raised her head and looked at him in disbelief. Under the faint golden and red light of the sun, she could see the teasing smile on his lips. The sigh in her eyes seemed to evaporate as it gradually turned into surprise and shyness. Xiao Su was amused by her expression. Why was she so cute? In his eyes, no one could compare to her at all. In the end, she leaned into his embrace and hugged him with both hands. Until the ink lingered around her body, she felt at ease. Big Ice Cube, I remember you once said that on my birthday, you would tell me a secret. She recalled this matter. Xiao Su didn't deny it. Do you want to hear it now? No. She raised her head, pressed her finger against his lips, and shook her head. I don't want to know now. Tell me when we come back from the battlefield and get married. But Xiao Su could not understand. That wasn't really a secret. It was just that the little guy had never known about it. It was about their first meeting in that remote Mao village. Chu Qingyan bit her lip and was a little distressed. Actually, I really want to know, but I feel that we should keep something in mind. This way, we can work hard to solve everything in front of us as soon as possible. At this point, she tilted her head, her long black hair falling over her shoulders. She was beautiful and her eyes lit up. I look forward to you telling me the truth when the time comes. You make it sound like I'm hiding something heinous from you. Xiao Su casually fiddled with her hair. His eyes were clear and bright with a hint of warmth. The corners of her mouth curled up as she pretended to be mysterious. Actually, I also have something that I've kept in my heart. I haven't told anyone about it. When the time comes, we'll exchange secrets. It was about her origin. It sounded unimaginable, and people might even think that it was some supernatural power. However, she believed that the big ice block would not think so. Okay. As long as she could be at ease, it was up to her. Cheng Yanluo and the others saw two figures cuddling and looking at the setting sun from afar. The afterglow shrouded them, one black and one red. One was the most dazzling sun in the sky, while the other was the warm sunset glow. When they met, they became the most magnificent scenery in the world. Cheng Yanluo seemed to be murmuring in a low voice, but she also seemed to be talking to Jean Xen beside her. Sometimes, when I see the two of them, I believe that there is still true love in this world. They will help each other in times of need and never leave each other. Things are unpredictable. I don't know if the two of them will be together forever. Jean Xen, who was feeding the horses, paused when he heard that. He looked at the backs of the two of them. He thought that the two of them would definitely be together until the end. When Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su came back, she had already taken off the phoenix hairpin and tied up her hair again. She was no longer as charming as before. Some people dressed as a woman were bright and moving, while others dressed as a man were gentle like jade. However, few people could pull off both at the same time. She could always do it with ease. It could be said that she was a delicate girl with 1,000 faces. When Chu Qingyan came back, she carefully put the brocade box into her bag. Cheng Yanluo saw that and couldn't help but tease her. She was about to retort when her fingers touched something hard. She took it out. It was Higashio Motetsu's gift to her on the day they left. She remembered that he told her to open it on her birthday. She couldn't wait to open it. She didn't know what he would give her and was secretly looking forward to it. When the box was opened, Cheng Yanluo came over. It was a fan. To be exact, it was a glazed fan. What a unique fan. Cheng Yanluo couldn't help but exclaim. It was as if she was blinded by what was inside. Chu Qingyan was also stunned. She took the glazed fan in her hand. It was heavy. It wasn't made of ordinary bamboo, but of purple crystal. She moved her fingers and the fan unfolded. In an instant, a stream of light flashed in front of her eyes. When she took a closer look, she could faintly see that there were small round dots that looked like gemstones. It was already close to night. The glazed fan was emitting a purple light in the dark. It was dizzying. It's obvious that the person who gave this gift has put in a lot of effort. Even Cheng Yanluo couldn't help but praise. Chu Qingyan looked at the distant sky and smiled. Dong Ting, thank you. Little girl, happy birthday. In a lush forest, Higashio Motetsu sat on a tall tree at the top of a mountain. He held a pot of wine in his hand and looked at the rising moon with a smile. He imagined what kind of surprised expression the little girl would have when she opened the gift he gave her. This was the first time he had so carefully prepared a gift for a girl. A gust of cold wind blew, dispersing the heat on his body and calming his thoughts. Ever since I met you, I haven't attended any of your birthdays. Perhaps I won't have the chance in the future. Because when we meet again, our positions will be, he didn't know why, but he felt a slight pain in his chest. His face turned cold. He raised his head and drank the wine in his hand. Then he loosened his grip. There was a crisp sound under the tree. He jumped down from the treetop and walked down the mountain with steady steps. Just as his mother said, no one would accompany another for a lifetime. Most of them would part ways after walking for a while. So it was time to part ways. But not until a long time later. He realized that it was just an excuse to deceive himself and others. For so many years, he had been surrounded by others. He didn't care about anyone. He didn't have any relatives or friends. He was very stingy. He didn't do business at a loss. But for one person he suffered a double loss. Still, he was happy and didn't feel bad. Later, he had an epiphany. In fact, he had given all his gentleness and kindness to the little girl who often sat on the treetop with him and talked nonsense. Chapter 889. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was a new day. The fierce cavalry were all experts among experts, and their recovery abilities were stronger than ordinary people. After a day and 2 nights of rest, they had recovered most of their energy. Thus, they were ready to set off early in the morning. Then, they saw their young princess consort following beside them, looking refreshed. They knew that their master had relented, and they were even more energized. Although no one said it out loud, they all understood in their hearts that the little princess was their master's life and all his thoughts. Therefore, they hoped that no matter where they went, they would be able to walk together. In the past, they didn't understand what love was. Now, not only did they see it clearly, but they also believed that with the little princess's intelligence and wisdom, following their master would be like adding wings to a tiger. Chu Qingyan didn't know what they were thinking. She was happy that everyone's injuries were almost healed. Then she counted the number of people in the fierce cavalry and ordered Jin Xian, Turin, and Huoling to coordinate and communicate. After all, the most important thing at this time was to be united. Ethereal saw Qing Yanlua's demonstration and his brows twitched. He wanted to persuade her, but he knew that she wouldn't listen. In the end, he sighed helplessly. Forget it, the boat will cross when it comes to it. The group continued on their journey. This time, their speed was even faster than before. Ever since the last attack, they didn't encounter any resistance. The enemy must have thought that they would be able to kill them in one blow, but they didn't expect to fail in one blow. They also didn't have any reinforcements. Thus, they traveled for 6 consecutive days, rain or shine, and successfully arrived at the place where the 3 armies were stationed. When they arrived, it was already late at night. Who is trespassing into the camp? Xiao Su and his men had just approached the camp when dozens of soldiers appeared at the wooden gate in front of them. They were holding spears and their blades were pointed at them. Chu Qingyan followed beside Xiao Su. She glanced at these people. Not to mention their expressions, their clothes were either stained with blood or torn in several places. They didn't look like imperial soldiers at all. In addition, they looked exhausted. Even if they had drawn their weapons, it wouldn't be enough for her to deal with them alone. Just by looking at these guards, she could guess what kind of situation the people inside were in. She couldn't help but frown. No matter how disastrous these losses were, it shouldn't be to this extent. She couldn't help but turn her head to look at Big Ice beside her. She saw that he had also noticed this, and his eyes were as dark as ink. Huoling took out a token from his chest and held it in his hand to show it to the guard. With the light from the fire on the platform, Chu Qingyan could faintly see the word on it. His Royal Highness? The guard standing at the front rubbed his eyes and saw the contents of the token clearly. He exclaimed in surprise and surprise. Following his shouts, the people behind him turned to look at Xiao Su in unison. At this time, Everyone noticed that the leader was wearing a mask. When they heard that His Royal Highness was 10 years old, the palace caught fire and burned his face, so he wore a mask all year round. When they thought of this, everyone fell to their knees. Your subordinate pays his respects to His Royal Highness. The respectful salutes were accompanied by tears of joy. It was as if they had been drifting on the sea for many days, and in their most helpless, painful, and fearful moment, they had welcomed their savior. One of the soldiers had already gone in to report. Just as everyone was kneeling, a group of soldiers in armor walked out of the main gate of the military camp. Most of them looked excited and incredulous. His Royal Highness, General. Everyone immediately surrounded them and escorted Xiao Su inside. Chu Qingyan looked at Big Ice, who was loved and respected by everyone, and suddenly understood what it meant to be supported by the people. She smiled and felt honored. Cheng Yenluo poked her arm and teased, "Don't you feel especially proud?" Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows smugly. "I feel like I've hugged the most powerful thigh in the world." After entering the tent, the soldiers in armor knelt on the ground and kowtowed sincerely and excitedly. "Your Highness, you're finally here. We've been waiting for you for a long time. We're useless. We haven't been able to guard your territory for the past 6 months." An old general wiped his slightly red eyes. "Your Highness, we've always believed that you'll come back." A young soldier's eyes shone brightly. Most of these people were his brothers who had followed him through life and death. Among them, there were many who had achieved countless military merits and could have used them to achieve a meteoric rise. However, Imperial Father was afraid that if these people were promoted and transferred, they would strengthen his power. Thus, intentionally or unintentionally, he neglected their existence. As a result, all these years, they were still guarding the furthest reaches of Sichuan Emperor's territory. Xiao Su raised his hand and gestured for everyone to rise. He walked over to the old general and personally helped him up. The old general was overwhelmed by the favor. He slowly opened his mouth. His tone was calm but amiable. "You don't have to worry. This prince has already taken the position of commander-in-chief. From now on, this prince will fight side by side with you. We'll take back the lost territory and regain the lost face. We'll revive Sichuan's prestige and not let the enemy look down on us." These words weren't very impassioned, but in everyone's ears, it made their blood boil. It was as if their dead passion had been reignited. They answered in unison. They were no longer as lifeless as they were at the beginning. "Count the number of soldiers you have and the number of casualties. Also, sort out the tactics for fighting the enemy at this stage. After 2 hours, we'll have a meeting in the main tent. You can't be absent. If you can't answer this prince's questions at that time, you'll be punished according to military law." Xiao Su wasn't a sentimental person. In front of outsiders, he was so rational that he was almost ruthless. No one felt that it was inappropriate. In the past, they had gone through fire and water with His Highness. They were used to his swift and decisive way of doing things. And this kind of His Highness made them feel more at ease. It was as if they had a backbone. They also knew that this wasn't the time to talk, so they didn't stay for long and immediately left. The soldiers rushed out in 2s and 3s. They swept away their previous decadence and walked with the wind. Soon, the tent was empty. The noisy atmosphere suddenly became cold and cheerless. Chu Qingyan, who was standing to the side, stared unblinkingly at the person sitting behind the table. It was as if she was seeing him for the first time. It turned out that when it came to official business, the big ice block was so strict and domineering. She hadn't finished sighing with emotion when she heard the sound of chaotic footsteps and persuasion outside the tent. "Your Highness, you still have injuries on your body. Walk slower. If your injuries open up again, then..." She heard an anxious voice. The words vaguely traveled in. "Don't stop me. My imperial brother is here. Naturally, I have to go see him. Moreover, this little injury is nothing. Don't make a fuss over nothing." The weak voice was impatient. It was a bit familiar, but it also felt strange. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but open her eyes in surprise. The person who came was Chapter 890. The person talking outside had already approached the tent. The moment he finished speaking, Chu Qingyan heard the sound of the tent's curtains being pulled open. It had been 4 years since they last saw each other. She was a little agitated. She wondered how the young man who used to follow her had grown up. Who's making a ruckus outside? Xiao Su's cold voice rang out. A white figure walked in first, but he didn't walk very fast. With a single glance, she could see the bright red bloodstains on the unlined clothing. His pale face was devoid of color, and he looked as if he had just escaped from the brink of death. Even though he was in such dire straits, the light from outside spread out behind him. His blurry silhouette gradually became clearer, like a piece of high-quality unpolished jade, blooming with dazzling light. At this moment, the person seemed to have pulled on his wounds due to his rapid movements. He gritted his teeth and endured, but the blood on his clothing became even redder. Cheng Yanluo couldn't help but take a step forward, wanting to see him clearly. However, this person seemed to only have eyes for the person sitting behind the table. He staggered 2 steps, then after steadying himself, he took a deep breath and slowly walked over. Chu Qingyan thought to herself that this was not a good time to reunite with him, so she retreated to her original spot. At the same time, she saw the soldiers behind him, and she gave up on the idea of going forward to support his tottering body. Xiao Ran's gaze was locked on the person in front of him. He was still the same energetic and calm person he had been when he left 4 years ago. After so many years, he hadn't changed at all. This was the person he had admired since he was a child. Xiao Ran bit his lower lip subconsciously and endured the pain in his body. He tried to make every step as steady as possible. He couldn't lose face in front of his imperial brother. He had always wanted to let his imperial brother know that he had worked hard all these years. However, he didn't expect to be in such a sorry state when they met again. He shook off the support from the people behind him and walked step by step to the center of the tent. Xiao Su, on the other hand, sat still and watched him walk over with a cold gaze. Neither of them spoke, and the people on the side seemed to feel that the atmosphere was not right. They all looked down and didn't move. After he steadied himself, he moved his lower lip and his eyes suddenly reddened. His expression was pained. Eldest brother, this subject brother has let down Sichuan, let down imperial father and the common people. He tried his best to suppress his emotions, but the moment he opened his mouth, he broke through. His hoarse voice was filled with pain, self-blame, and regret. It's just a few defeats. Now raise your head. You're the Prince of Sichuan, the current commander-in-chief of the 3 armies. As long as the commander-in-chief doesn't fall, the morale of the army won't fall. Look at what you've become. After he was done venting, Xiao Su spoke calmly, but every word he said hit the nail on the head, directly hitting his heart. Only then did Xiao Ran slowly raise his head. The redness in his eyes made him look like a desperate little beast. Just now, he didn't dare to look directly at his eldest imperial brother. Now that he heard his words, his heart was filled with regret and relief. This was the person he had always respected. With just a few words, he had saved him from a dead end. Eldest brother, I already know about the imperial edict. Right now, you are the commander-in-chief of the 3 armies, so I am willing to step down. Xiao Ran did not have any lingering thoughts about this position. This was something that imperial father had fought for him. Originally, he had been full of ambition and wanted to do something big. Who would have thought that being an armchair strategist was a very sad thing? Now, it could finally be returned to its rightful owner. Xiao Ran came forward and took out a token from his sleeve before placing it on the table. Hua Ling and Turin on the side saw the token that His Majesty had taken from their master 4 years ago. Now, it was being sent back in this kind of situation. The 2 of them were filled with emotion. What happened to your wounds? Xiao Su's gaze did not look at the token. Instead, it stopped at his chest and he asked with a frown. Xiao Ran followed his gaze and lowered his head. A trace of bitterness rose in the corner of his mouth. I lost the last battle and left the city. However, I was ambushed and narrowly escaped death. I only returned to the camp today. He said it easily, but that narrow escape really made him wander around the gates of hell before returning. Xiao Su nodded. He knew about the matter of his fourth brother going missing. Now that he was standing in front of him, he was relieved. Your battle experience is almost 0. This time, you were the leader of the army in the battle. It was a bit hard on you. No matter what happens in this half a year, you don't have to blame yourself too much. Seeing the blood on his chest, Xiao Su thought for a bit and comforted him with a few words. Although the struggle for power in the court had entered a white-hot stage, this brother of his, he had never wronged him since he was young. Even now, he still did. Brother, you don't have to comfort me. I know my limits. Xiao Ran's mood was very low. You are heavily injured. Go and rest first. Everything else can wait until your body recovers. Xiao Su knew that he would not be able to walk out of this shadow for a while. He needed some time to adjust, so he didn't say more to him. Xiao Ran knew that his eldest brother had been busy since arriving at the military camp. It was best that he did not disturb him. However, there was something hidden in his heart. If he didn't ask now, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat or sleep. Eldest brother, I have something to ask. Xiao Ran gathered his courage and said. Xiao Su picked up the document. He didn't even raise his eyebrows. Ask. Standing to the side, Chu Qingyan saw Xiao Ran's lonely and self-blaming appearance from the moment he came in. He was not as high-spirited and unforgiving as he was in Jingdo. She couldn't help but feel a trace of pity. She thought that he must have suffered a lot during this period. Otherwise, a person who loved to laugh so much in the past would often look so dejected now. Now that she heard him ask, her curiosity was piqued. He stammered as if he wanted to ask something. But at that moment, Qingyan Luo suddenly entered the accounting room. She walked over to Chu Qingyan and whispered a few words in her ear. Chu Qingyan glanced at the uneasy Xiao Ran, then followed Qingyan Luo out. Because Chu Qingyan was standing in the dark and Xiao Ran was sitting in the main seat, he didn't notice her at all. So when she left, he didn't notice. Xiao Ran crossed his fingers in front of him. After pursing his lips, he finally asked in a low voice, Eldest brother, how has Qingyan been these past few years? As soon as he said this, Xiao Su's hand froze, but he still didn't look up. His tone was the same as before. She can run, jump, play, and fool around. Xiao Ran couldn't help but smile when he heard this short sentence. Scenes of the past floated before his eyes. Hearing the little girl's cheerful words and bright eyes, a lot of the worries in his heart immediately dissipated. Then what does she like to eat, wear, and use now? He blurted out. Then he felt that it was a little inappropriate. He scratched his head and said unnaturally, I've written her a few letters in the past few years, but I haven't sent them out. I only send them to her before she goes to war. Xiao Su's expression was calm. She likes everything that's delicious, beautiful, and useful. Xiao Ran felt that this range was very broad. He scratched his head again and finally asked the question that had been on his mind. Has she mentioned me in the past few years? Chapter 891. Xiao Ran instantly froze. Qingyan had not missed him all these years? In the end, he did not know how he left the tent. His soulless appearance attracted the attention of the soldiers on both sides. Was the fourth prince too sad because he handed over his military power? Or was he scolded by his royal highness? But it didn't look like it either. Chu Qingyan finished her work and walked towards Xiao Ran. She couldn't help but want to wave at him, but the other side acted like he didn't see her and floated past her. She awkwardly put her hand down in the air and turned around to look at Xiao Ran's floating figure. She was a bit confused. Was he possessed? Or was he scolded by the big ice block? Forget it, there was still a long way to go and they would meet sooner or later. Right now, it was better for her to avoid suspicion. After all, women were not allowed in the military camp. At this time, she could not cause any trouble for the big ice block. When there was a suitable opportunity, she would come back to meet Xiao Ran. Thinking of this, she returned to the tent. Where did you go? As soon as she went in, she heard the big ice block's voice. Looking up, she saw that his eyes were on the table and not looking at her. She muttered in her heart. She was a living person in front of Xiao Ran, but he did not recognize her. Now that she had only lifted the curtain, the big ice block recognized her from her voice. Could it be that she and the big ice block had a telepathic connection? Thinking of this, her heart became a bit happier. Just now, Steward Lee from the military camp came to find me. He said that he wanted to prepare everyone's food and clothing and asked me to help. She walked closer to him. At this time, he was the only one in the tent, so she did not have any scruples. She leaned in front of him and whispered to him. He was relieved to leave these matters to her. Speaking of which, this person is quite efficient. Just now, he had already set up several tents, bedding, and other daily necessities. Now, I've already asked Jean Xan to bring some people to tidy them up. She stroked her chin and thought back to the person she had just met. Her words were full of praise. Xiao Su thought for a moment before replying, Manager Li used to work under me. He's reliable. If you need anything, you can look for him. Chu Qingyan was slightly surprised. You even know him? She thought that since the big ice cube had reached such a high position, he wouldn't be able to communicate with the people below. Why did it feel like he was very familiar with them? You're wrong. As a leader, you have to know everyone's situation. That's the best way to know people. If someone uses this to deceive you, you can only be kept in the dark. Only when you understand everything can you take control. If you want to make any decision accurately, you need the right time, the right place, and the right people. No one is born knowing how to lead an army into battle. Even if one is talented, without hard work, one can only fade into the crowd. Xiao Su didn't simply dismiss her question. Instead, he seriously considered it before answering her. Perhaps Chu Qingyan didn't understand his words right now, but in the future, she would know that the words he usually said had been integrated into her life, benefiting her for the rest of her life. Chu Qingyan carefully pondered over his words. When she looked at him again, her eyes were filled with worship and respect. Many people only saw his strategizing side, but didn't know how much sweat and hard work he had put in behind it. As the saying goes, 1 minute on the stage is 10 years of hard work off the stage. Big Ice Cube, my heart aches for you. Chu Qingyan propped up her chin with both hands, her eyes filled with love. He was stunned. He was just telling her how to manage people, but he didn't expect her brain to be so strange, jumping to other places in an instant. Then he gave a low cough, his ears slightly red as he said, I'm not as weak as you think. Perhaps it was because the words had taken away the heat, he recovered his indifference. As a man, as a prince, I have to bear more than others. I've already prepared myself a long time ago, so I've never felt tired. You don't need to think too much. You must be tired from the journey, so you should go rest first. Chu Qingyan was first moved by his words, but when she heard the last sentence, she immediately stood up and shook her head, saying, I'm not accompanying you to be a vase. I also want to sit in on the discussion later. Xiao Su muttered to himself. In the end, under her sparkling eyes, he agreed, remember not to reveal your identity. Understood. She stood at attention and gave a standard salute. Xiao Su was amused by her mischievous appearance. Oh right, when I came in just now, I saw Xiao Ran. He looked like he was struck by lightning. Did you teach him a lesson too harshly? She casually asked. When Xiao Su heard this, he couldn't help but recall Xiao Ran's shocked expression. He tapped his fingers on the table, his expression indifferent as he looked at the person in front of him. You want to fight for justice for him? Chu Qingyan didn't notice the strangeness in his tone. She chuckled, then gritted her teeth and said, Why would I fight for justice for him? I don't even have time to kick him twice. Xiao Su was a little surprised. When did the little fellow and Xiao Ran have such a deep grudge? Why didn't he know? He heard her snort softly. If he was a little more competent and defeated Nansong earlier, he wouldn't have lost the city to the point where he had to change the general and rush you back from Jiangnan. I wouldn't have had to follow him to the battlefield, and the commoners would have been able to live and work in peace. That's why I think you should give him a good scolding. As the saying goes, if you don't beat him, you won't become anything. I also want to beat him up to vent my anger. More importantly, the current situation, regardless of whether it was Sichuan Emperor's favoritism or Consort Yu's scheme, was all because of Xiao Ran. She wasn't so foolish as to vent her anger on Xiao Ran. Instead, she hoped that if he really wanted to sit on the throne, he would show it to the civil and military officials and make the commoners submit to him. He wouldn't need others to help him clean up his mess. This way, he wouldn't involve the big ice cube again. It was easy to get in but hard to get out. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but compare him to the big ice cube. She felt that if the big ice cube could do something at his age, he should be able to do it too. Now, she was angry at him for failing to live up to her expectations. Xiao Su relaxed his brows when he felt the little fellow's surging emotions. He felt much better. He said calmly, he's still young and inexperienced. It's already not easy for him to achieve what he has today. The next time you see him, you don't have to be too harsh on him. But when you were younger than him, you already managed the army well. Chu Qingyan was dissatisfied. Xiao Su raised his brows and said in a low voice, Ian, you have to remember that there is only one Xiao Su in this world. Chu Qingyan was stunned. Was the big ice cube affirming himself? However, this was a well-deserved title. In the future, when you see Xiao Ran in the army, remember not to reveal his identity. He has too many henchmen of the Fu family around him. Oh, okay. She thought that the big ice cube was worried that the Fu family would use this opportunity to create trouble. Unexpectedly, he was trying to prevent his unlucky younger brother from coveting his baby. Chapter 892. 2 hours passed quickly. The two sides of the main tent were filled with generals who commanded a certain amount of troops. This General Gao Hao pays his respects to His Royal Highness. This General Jing Guangwei pays his respects to His Royal Highness. After waiting for everyone to pay their respects, Xiao Su waved his hand. Please sit. At the front of the right was the pale-faced Xiao Ran. Although Xiao Su didn't approve of his lack of care for his body, he didn't ask him to leave. Xiao Su didn't bother with the pleasantries and went straight to the point. Report the current situation of the soldiers in your hands. The 1st Battalion originally had 12,000 soldiers. 5,612 died in battle, and 3,578 were injured. Soon, the reports came in one after another, with a civilian official recording the data. Even if Chu Qingyan hadn't experienced a war before, she could feel how terrible the war was just by looking at the data. How fierce the war with the Southern Blue Army was, and how disastrous the losses were. Her gaze inadvertently fell on Xiao Ran, who was in front of her. Every time he heard a number, his face paled a little. His fingers were clenched on the armchair, and his veins were bulging. His face was calm, but his eyes were dark. It was obvious that he was enduring a lot of pain. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but sigh. He wasn't an ice cube, so he couldn't be blamed for not commanding the army well and controlling the situation well. While she was in a daze, everyone finished reporting. Xiao Su immediately gave the order to train the troops the next morning. Although everyone didn't know why Xiao Su would have the leisure to train at such a critical juncture, Xiao Su's accumulated prestige was still indelible in their hearts. Therefore, most of them accepted the order. However, there were always some people who didn't fear death and challenged authority. For example, the person standing behind Xiao Ran, Fu Shouyu. Fu Shouyu stood up and said in a strange tone, General Ping Nan, I wonder what the meaning of your order is? The enemy is right in front of you, and you're training here. Aren't you afraid of being unprepared and losing the city again? You were specially sent by the imperial court to deal with the Southern Blue Army. You're not here to play house. At this time, there was actually someone who was not afraid of death and dared to stand up against Xiao Su. This man was a descendant of the right minister's side branch. Against Xiao Su, everybody on the street knew Sima Zhao's intention. Everyone looked at each other, and the atmosphere suddenly froze. Xiao Su glanced at him indifferently, not taking him seriously at all. However, Fu Shouyu, who had his head held high and his chest puffed out, had his spirit erased by this one glance. The light gaze gave people a kind of austere and iron-blooded pressure. Fu Shouyu resisted the urge to retreat and braced himself to hold on. General Fu, right? Fu Shouyu knew that he had never seen him before, but he didn't expect him to know him. It is this general. Chu Qingyan watched from the side. When the big ice cube looked at her and asked a simple question, it had already taken control of the situation. The other party's momentum had already lost by 30%. She was looking forward to how the big ice cube was going to teach this rude person a lesson. 10 days ago, you led 5,000 soldiers to defend the southern city. The other party sent 6,000 soldiers to resist. Although there was a large disparity in numbers, you only used 3 days to defeat the city. Is this true? Xiao Su looked at him calmly. Fu Shouyu didn't know why he was dragged into this, but since the question was asked, he couldn't avoid it. He refuted, that's right. The other party used a tactic of attrition. Our people were exhausted, and in the end, we lost miserably. It can be said that we lost because we had fewer people. Is that so? Xiao Su laughed in a low voice. Hearing this, everyone felt their hair stand on end. Fu Shouyu felt that he was being looked down upon. He sneered, "Do you think this general dares to deceive the general?" Xiao Su ignored his words. Twirling the brush between his fingers, he said unhurriedly, "If this prince didn't remember wrongly, the 5,000 soldiers given to you were the elites of the 3 armies. The other party only sent ordinary soldiers." Everyone present was in an uproar. Because of the recent battle, they rarely paid attention to these details. Only when Xiao Su revealed this matter did everyone remember it. They looked at Fu Shouyu in shock. Those who could be called elites were the strongest soldiers in the 3 armies. At least, they could fight 1 against 5. If they were defeated by 6,000 ordinary soldiers, it could only mean that the leader of the army was incompetent and had made the wrong deployment. That was why the fortified city had been lost to the enemy. Sensing the scrutiny and doubt of his colleagues, Fu Shouhu's face turned pale from his previous arrogance. He didn't expect Xiao Su to know his every move so well. It was too scary. Moreover, he had been recommended to the 3 armies because he was a collateral member of the Fu clan. Many people knew that he didn't go through the proper channels. But now, Xiao Su had revealed this in front of everyone. He had no face left. Fu Shouyu relied on nepotism to abuse his power. He was uneducated, had no talent, and had no inner strength. Many people were already dissatisfied with him, but they didn't dare to say anything because they were afraid of the Fu clan's power. Now, does General Fu have any objections? Xiao Su's tone was as calm as ever. How could Fu Shouyu dare to speak again? The other party didn't answer directly. Instead, he casually said something that caught him off guard. He had failed to lead the army. How could he still have the face to speak? Even if he felt indignant, no one would be willing to stand on his side. There were also a few members of the Fu family present. They originally wanted to support Fu Shouyu, but as soon as they saw him speak, they were silenced by Xiao Su's words. They recalled their performance on the battlefield and silently retracted their feet. They lowered their heads, afraid that Xiao Su would target them and use them as an example to make an example out of them. When Xiao Su saw that Fu Shouyu had nothing to say, he looked around at the indignant crowd and said loudly, "Since this king is the commander-in-chief, I will not neglect the safety of the 3 armies. Tomorrow this king wants to see all the soldiers. If anyone is absent or late, they will be punished according to military rules. The general in the platoon will receive double the punishment." Everyone accepted the order. "Hand in the battle dossiers you have written. Prepare for tomorrow's drill." Xiao Su didn't waste any time and dismissed them. Everyone was intimidated by Xiao Su's cold and imposing aura. They silently handed in their dossiers and left. His Royal Highness had set the fire 3 times. The first time was on the Fu clan. The second time was on the 3 armies. The third time was probably coming soon. But in the eyes of the faithful, the torches burned well, burned brilliantly, and burned with a sound of gurgling. After everyone left, Xiao Ran was the only one left in the tent. He stood up and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Eldest brother, you don't have to give me face. Punish those who should be punished. I will not complain." He was referring to the Fu clan faction. In fact, he also hated those who relied on connections. Xiao Su opened the dossiers and quickly browsed through them as if he didn't care. Even if you don't say it, I will not let go of anyone who takes advantage of the loopholes. Xiao Ran's expression was bitter. As expected, his eldest brother was still so impartial. Chapter 893. Go back and rest. Your next task is to nurse your body back to health. Otherwise, Father Emperor and your mother consort will be worried. Xiao Su looked at him standing there in a daze. It was as if he had seen the scene from more than 10 years ago, when he had pulled on his sleeves and curiously asked him about the battlefield again and again. Xiao Su couldn't help but soften his heart. Xiao Ran's heart warmed when he heard this. He thought that his eldest brother had lost hope in him. Chen Di will take good care of himself and won't let you worry. His young face glowed with vitality. Xiao Su's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile when he saw this. He was about to wave his hand to dismiss him. At this time, Xiao Ran fearlessly opened his mouth. Eldest brother, after this war, can Chen Di go find Qingyan? Chen Di misses her very much. The smile in his eyes suddenly disappeared. Xiao Su's mouth twitched and his voice was indifferent. We'll talk about it again. Xiao Ran felt the temperature in the tent suddenly drop. He thought that he was injured and his bones were weak. He couldn't help but be more determined to nurse his body back to health. Leaving the main tent, Xiao Ran slowly walked back to his own tent with the help of his subordinates. At this time, a youth in red walked in front of him. His appearance was delicate and handsome. It could be seen that he was young, but his temperament was outstanding and he had a rare quick-wittedness. Xiao Ran stopped in his tracks. When the other party saw him, he also slowed down and stopped. The two of them were only 5 steps apart. Who are you? Why don't you pay your respects to our Fourth Highness? The subordinate who was supporting Xiao Ran reprimanded arrogantly. Seeing that the other party wasn't wearing any armor or military badge, he didn't seem to have any official position and was easy to control. The subordinate became snobbish. When Xiao Ran heard his subordinate's words, he couldn't help but frown. He was about to scold him when he saw that the other party had already bowed slightly. Greetings to your Royal Highness the Fourth Prince. I am Chu Yen, serving under His Royal Highness. I did not mean to offend your Royal Highness. Please forgive me. Chu Qingyan leaned forward and lowered her eyes. At an angle that Xiao Ran and the others couldn't see, her lips curled into a faint mocking smile. Xiao Ran, I didn't expect that after not seeing each other for so many years, we would actually meet again in such a manner. Xiao Ran wanted to stop him, but it was too late. He glared angrily at the subordinate next to him. That subordinate originally wanted to use his master's power to intimidate others, but once he saw his master's gaze, his legs trembled and he immediately lowered his head. So you are the guest that my eldest brother took in Lian City. I know that my emperor brother has always valued you. You don't have to be so polite. Xiao Ran stepped forward, wanting to personally help her up, but Chu Qingyan avoided him. Xiao Ran was stunned for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. Chu Qingyan casually took a step back, then raised her head to look at the person in front of her. A faint smile hung on her lips. Your Royal Highness is too kind. This one is merely running errands for His Royal Highness. For some reason, Xiao Ran found her to be very pleasing to the eye. Her words were humble and her attitude was neither servile nor overbearing. It was rare to see someone of her age. Xiao Ran wanted to get close to her. Chu Qingyan, you are too modest. I naturally understand my emperor brother's temperament. If you don't have any ability, you won't be able to stay by his side. When he talked about Xiao Su, Xiao Ran's eyes lit up. Chu Qingyan saw the admiration in his eyes and frowned slightly. When the two parties were fighting so fiercely, the two main characters didn't seem to care at all. If they were to fall out, how would the two of them deal with it? It seemed that the people in the imperial court were a bunch of troublemakers who were more anxious than the eunuchs. Although Chu Qingyan didn't answer, Xiao Ran saw the smile on her face. For some reason, his heart relaxed a lot. And the person in front of him was like a jade tree. He felt a trace of familiarity and couldn't help but think of the unscrupulous and crafty young girl from back then. Chu Yen, how is the environment in Lian City? Is it very difficult to live there? Chu Qingyan saw that he was seriously injured and was a little weak. She wanted to leave, but she didn't think that he would have the intention to chat. She was a little suspicious. Could it be that he saw through her identity? However, when she met his sincere gaze, she dispelled this concern. When I first arrived, it could be said that it was a place where chickens didn't lay eggs and birds didn't shit. The people didn't have enough to eat and the customs were tough. There was no peace to speak of. Chu Qingyan saw that although he was seriously injured, his mental state was still good. So she stayed a little longer to tell him about it. The young man in front of her had a face like the full moon and lips like a red lotus. He was no longer the brat from 4 years ago. His facial features had matured and he was also a handsome young man who would be thrown fruits at by people when he walked out. Chu Qingyan was very gratified. She didn't know if it was because she automatically brought in the identity of his sister-in-law, but she felt more and more like she was looking at a junior. Thus, she picked out a few interesting stories from Lian City and told him about them. So it really is a remote and desolate place. Xiao Ran pulled the corner of his mouth and there was a strange look in his eyes. Before Chu Qingyan could see it clearly, he had already returned to normal and stared at the ground with a hesitant expression. Chu Qingyan felt that it was about time to go back. Just now when the generals handed over the dossiers, she guessed that Big Ice Cube would be reading through it all night. So she left at that time and found the cook to prepare some food for her Big Ice Cube to fill his stomach. But she didn't expect to meet Xiao Ran here. Moreover, he seemed to be very interested in learning about the matters in Lian City. Chu Yen. Chu Qingyan was suddenly called by him and subconsciously looked at him. He looked hesitant and she couldn't help but take the initiative to speak. Your Highness, do you have something to ask? Xiao Ran didn't deny it and nodded. Then he waved his subordinates away and had them stand far away. Those subordinates knew that Chu Qingyan was Xiao Su's subordinate and were very worried about letting the two of them be alone. But under Xiao Ran's cold gaze, they had no choice but to retreat. Chu Qingyan felt that Xiao Ran was mostly cheerful and easygoing at times and arrogant at times. But just now, she saw a shadow of Big Ice Cube on him. He was quiet and dignified. She laughed in her heart. As expected of a brother. At this time, Xiao Ran had already started to speak hesitantly. Chu Yen, you've been in Lian City for so long. You should have seen a girl called Chu Qingyan, right? Has she been living well in Lian City these past few years? Has she suffered a lot? Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. She didn't expect him to ask about this. But at this time, Xiao Ran was already looking at her with sparkling eyes. He looked both expectant and nervous. Under your Highness's protection, she has been living very well. She hasn't suffered much. Every day, she grows flowers and raises small animals. She doesn't have any worries. Chu Qingyan spoke against her conscience. She looked away and didn't look at Xiao Ran. So she didn't see the joy and longing in Xiao Ran's eyes. That's good, that's good. Xiao Ran's eyes were filled with joy. Then he said, Chu Yen, I have something to ask of you. Chapter 894. When Xiao Ran said this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but look at him. If there's anything this one can help with, this one will definitely do his best. Xiao Ran smiled and nodded. This youth was gentle and polite, very much to his liking. I'll look for you after the drill tomorrow, okay? Chu Qingyan thought for a moment, then finally nodded. Okay. After answering, she felt that there was nothing else to delay, so she planned to say her goodbyes. Unexpectedly, the person opposite her seemed to have something to say. Chu Qingyan, do you know how to paint? Xiao Ran's eyes suddenly lit up and he looked at her expectantly. Chu Qingyan couldn't figure out what he wanted to do, but after traveling for so many years, she instinctively narrowed her eyes. I don't know why your Highness is asking this. Xiao Ran didn't notice the inquisitive look in her eyes. He coughed lightly, as if it was a bit unnatural. Chu Qingyan finally noticed the faint blush on his face. It was much better than his previous paleness. Thinking that he was coughing because of his wound, she looked worried. It's like this, I haven't seen Qingyan for many years. We used to play well in the capital, and now I miss her. Unfortunately, she's now in a foreign land. I don't know when I'll see her again, so, when he said this, Xiao Ran's fake calmness couldn't help but become uneasy. He coughed again before he finished speaking. So I want to ask you, can you paint her current appearance? He had always wanted to know how she looked like now, but Mu Fei had never allowed him to interfere with Lianqing's matters. Eldest imperial brother had protected her so well that not a drop of water could leak out. He simply couldn't obtain her painting scroll. He knew that he was being rude. If it was someone else, he definitely wouldn't ask this, but this youth in front of him made him have an inexplicable urge to confide in him. Chu Qingyan's heart was moved. She hadn't thought that in a place like Jingdou, there would still be a friend who cared about her so much. She had thought that after so many years, no matter how deep their friendship was, it would have faded with time. She hadn't paid much attention to the letter in Jiangnan, but now, seeing him so sincerely concerned about her, her throat felt a little dry. Unfortunately, now was not the time to reveal his identity. She blinked a few times to get rid of the tears in her eyes and shook her head regretfully. This one has been practicing martial arts for many years and rarely comes into contact with those refined talents, so I have to disappoint the fourth prince. A look of disappointment flashed across Xiao Ran's face, but he soon felt relieved. Although Chu Yan was with his eldest brother, he was still an outsider. Even if he could draw Qingyan's appearance, he couldn't draw her charm. Only someone who knew her well would be able to draw her every frown and smile. It's nothing. Thank you, Brother Chu, for talking with me so much tonight. See you tomorrow. Xiao Ran smiled gratefully at her. Then he called for his subordinates and slowly left. Chu Qingyan watched his back. The night wind blew and lifted his clothes. She had a feeling that he hadn't been living well these past few years. Just as she was lost in thought, Su Yi came over and said that His Highness had sent people out to find her because she hadn't returned for a long time. Chu Qingyan nodded. The thought that had just formed in her mind dissipated. She took Su Yi back. Entering the tent, her sharp eyes saw the supper on the table. She thought that the cook in the military camp was quite efficient. She also guessed why Big Ice Cube was worried about her. The food was here, but she was nowhere to be seen. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Where did you go? Xiao Su held a file in his hand and leaned back in his chair to read it. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he raised his head and looked at her calmly. The tent wasn't big. The candlelight lit up the room, along with the person sitting there. He was very tall, neither thin nor fat. In modern terms, he had a standard figure. He wore a black robe with a vertical collar. In the middle, there was a sparkling white gem that gave people a kind of abstinence aura. From head to toe, other than the gem, there was a jade pendant on his belt. There were no other decorations. His face was covered with a mask that covered his picturesque appearance. Only a pair of black glass eyes, a delicate chin, and thin pursed lips were revealed. The candlelight flickered in his eyes, flowing with light. Other than that, his skin was covered by his clothes. Looking down, only a pair of slender fingers were on the file. It was a hand that was more beautiful than a woman's. It was like porcelain. In the night, it seemed to have a flowing luster. Just by sitting there, one could feel his elegance and grace with just a glance and a movement. She couldn't help being dazed. Xiao Su didn't wait for her reply for a long time. He couldn't help but search her eyes. When he saw the infatuation in her eyes, the corners of his mouth naturally hooked up. Come here. He seemed to be able to capture her soul. With just one sentence, she couldn't help but walk towards him. When she walked in front of him, Xiao Su pointed at the bowl of hot soup. Eat this and then go to sleep. Chu Qingyan glanced at it and crossed her arms. That's for people who stay up all night to eat. Xiao Su didn't persuade her. It's getting late. You should go back early. When Chu Qingyan heard this, she immediately moved a chair from the side and sat beside him. She supported herself on the table with both hands and smiled slyly. I'll accompany you tonight. Don't mess around. Xiao Su frowned. I'm serious. Chu Qingyan didn't pester endlessly like before. Instead, she said each word seriously. Xiao Su looked into her pair of lively eyes and saw the persistence. In the end, he casually took a file and placed it in front of her. Ask me if you don't understand. Chu Qingyan then revealed a smug smile. Yes, my general. Xiao Su was amused by her teasing. He shook his head helplessly. He really got himself a clown. However, he really needed this clown. All right, we'll both stay up all night and eat one piece each. She took the green bean cake from the side and stuffed it into his mouth when he lowered his head. When he turned back to look at her disapprovingly, she smiled innocently. Next, the two of them quietly read. Other than the crackling of the candlelight, there was only the sound of pages being flipped. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Su put down a file. He turned his head to look at the person beside him who was so quiet. However, he only saw the side of her face lying on the table. Her skin was creamy and her face was powdered. Her eyes were closed and her eyelashes were long and curly, casting a shadow under the light. The corners of her mouth were slightly curved. It was a pure smile, but it faintly revealed a seductive charm. Xiao Su took off his coat and covered her body. His gaze stayed on her body for a while before moving away. Tonight, when he was looking through the files, he found that the situation of the three armies was worse than he had expected. There were good and bad people mixed together and their strength was much weaker than before. He suddenly had a lot of uncertainties about this war. At this time, the appearance of the little fellow had unknowingly calmed down the anxiety in his heart. At this time, when he heard her long breathing, his heart had calmed down a lot. He picked up the file again and seriously read it. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.